quickly went online and I logged in. I went onto TMZ, boom, and there it was. Jani Lane dead at 47. And I cried. Gene goes, hey, what is that kid's name again? And she goes, that's Stevie Rachelle. He's from Tuff. And Gene told her, that kid's a star. It was that day that I said, screw this. I'm sick of asking people for press or for favors. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to build a website. The internet's this new thing. And literally, I swear off the top of my head, I said to myself, I'm going to call it Metal Sludge.
Did your looks ever become an issue? Like the other guys, like, fuck, it's always about Stevie. Did that ever become a problem?
Todd, it did for Todd at some point. Hey, what's your stage name? And I'm like, Steve Loxus. And they're like, Loxus? What's Loxus? And I go, oh, it's the word sexual spelled backwards. Open up our door, and there's like 2 or 3 guys on the ground. Dean's fucking screaming and yelling. People are holding him back. Michael Kelly Smith's on the ground holding his arm. They're like, dude, that's the fucking dumbest fucking stage name. They came up with this idea that the song was hot. It was starting to track and chart. And they said, we're switching the video. We're doing this instead. I'm like, well, she said I was fat. Maybe I should quick do a workout. I'm in my fucking boxer shorts, doing push-ups. I'm doing crunches. I'm jumping jacks. I'm stretching. I'm like, if I can get in shape in the next 15 minutes, I got it. Long story short, we leave that meeting. The next day, our manager calls us on May 14th of 1992 and says, you're dropped.
Yeah.
Atlantic is dropping you. I will say this, that in 2026, American hair metal is being released. Anthony, I'm telling you, every single thing I predicted happened.
Okay.
The album's called Tuff American Hair Metal, and the single main track is American Hair Band. So for all you that don't like those terms, fuck you.
The hair metal guru, from Warren to Crew, the hair metal guru, never forget Charlie too.
When you talk about interviews that I've most wanted to do since this channel began, Stevie Rachelle is right at the top of the list. Not only did he put out one of my favorite albums of all time with Tuff's What Comes Around Goes Around in 1991, but he almost single-handedly kept this genre alive and in the mainstream with his website Metal Sludge, which has been in existence since 1998. On top of that, he is one of the most honest, tell it like it is guys in rock and roll, and I'm going to stop kissing his ass now. With that, Stevie Rachelle, welcome to the show.
Anthony, thank you so much for having me. I don't know if I deserve all those accolades, whatever they are, but it's appreciated.
Absolutely. Did you ever think we'd be talking about Tuff and Metal Sludge all these years later in 2025?
You know, somebody has asked me that in the past, and I might have even brought it up myself, that, you know, in 1995, 30 years ago, Tuff ended.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it was late this month. We were on tour, and my dog actually was killed while we were on the road, October 29th of 95. And it was after that night I said to George, I said, there's a black cloud, man. You know, we had 3 record deals. We've had 3 bass players, 3 drummers, 3 booking agents, 3 managers, 10 years going on. It's time to call it a day. I'm throwing in the towel. So when we got off that tour at the end of November, Tuff ended. And that was 30 years ago. And at that point, I thought, okay, what do I do next? Started working a normal job. I was working at a moving company. You know, 5-6 years later, the 2000s hit. I think Poison got back together. Steel Panther, you know, before they were actually Steel Panther, Metal Shop, then Metal School. They were starting to create this whole buzz. And the Rock Never Stops tours and stuff started picking up, and everybody kind of started getting back together. So at that point I said, let me do this. But did I think that in 2025, I would be looking into 2026, going on my, I think, 6th or 7th cruise, going out of the country again. You know, since 2000, I've played in 30 countries around the world. I've played more around the globe than I have in the US in the last 25 years. Never would have thought it, but I'm very grateful
Yeah.
to be involved, to be here, even for just a little bit of it, you know?
For somebody who's so synonymous with whatever you want to call it, hair metal or hard rock, you weren't initially a rock guy, right?
No, no. My initial interest in music stemmed from my love of skateboarding, which I started skateboarding as a kid. To my best recollection, I would say it was probably 1974, 75. I'm like 8 or 9 years old. And my friend Andy, who lived about 4 or 5 houses away, he got a pink Huffy skateboard, which was about this big, and the tail was like that, had
Yeah.
these little urethane wheels with ball bearings in it. And we would push down the street and coast up onto the driveway and see who could coast down the most sidewalk blocks. You know, every 3 or 5 feet, there's one of those lines in the block, right? And we were doing that like Andy went 20, I went 24, he went 27. The next day we went 33, and we're coasting all the way down the block. And at that point, I became obsessed with skateboarding.
Yeah.
That turned into us building ramps. I started buying the magazines. My other friends were skating. Next thing you know, we're building quarter pipes and half pipes, going to skate parks. And with all of that came the background, the Sex Pistols, Devo, the B-52s, 999, the Surf Punks, Madness, the Specials, you know, XTC,
Yeah.
just Squeeze, the Split Ends, all of that stuff was the Plasmatics, was the soundtrack to my youth as a prepubescent teen, you know, at 10, 11, 12.
Yep.
Then at 14, it's 1980. um, I became basically expert level, and at some point I was thinking maybe I could go pro as a skater. But then in 1981, MTV hits. So a lot of those same bands now are being featured on MTV, and you know, it expanded. Oingo Boingo, you know, just all of this stuff. I was so into it, and it wasn't until late in high school, my senior year, I was a couple of weeks, couple of months away from turning 18 when I went to my first metal concert, which was Kiss on the Lick It Up tour. That was 1984. That was my first real exposure to metal where it affected me.
Yeah.
I had heard it, been hearing Loverboy on the radio, been hearing Def Leppard. Of course, I knew about Rush and Black Sabbath and all that kind of stuff, but Van Halen, a lot of that stuff was really foreign to me. I didn't know a lot about it.
I wanted, and we're gonna get into your turn into metal, but
Right.
talking about your childhood, I know like your father died when you were young,
8.
and when you were 8, and then I think it's late 70s, maybe around 78. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your brother passes away, and it's a lot of mystery. Can you like tell us
Correct.
what happened with your brother?
So my father died in May of 74. I was 8 years old. And my mom and dad had already been divorced for a few years. And it's early 70s. You know, father's rights were probably not fully in effect. And my dad was with some other woman and started having kids with her. And him and my mom weren't getting along. So, you know, there wasn't a lot of time that was spent with my father, you know, especially in those last few years of his life.
Yeah.
Then a few years later, it's 1978 in the fall. I'm 12. My brother was just out of the house, had just turned 19, and he was actually killed, murdered. And like you said, there's a lot of mystery that surrounds it. We don't really know as to what ever happened, but it was a pretty crazy, pretty crazy couple years for me as a younger boy growing up. You know.
How, like, I mean, how does that impact you? I have an older brother. I idolized my older brother. I mean, I can't imagine what, like, do you feel like it messed you up, or do you feel like you bounced back? I mean,
I mean, yeah, no, because you know, at some point you see stories on the news all the time. You hear about people having been brought up in a hard life or being poor, and that's their excuse for doing more of the same and going into being a bad guy per se.
Yeah.
I remember thinking to myself, because, you know, full disclosure, my brother was not an angel. You know, my brother was a high school dropout. I think he was probably out by he was 16. He was smoking. He was smoking pot, probably, you know, dealing and taking quaaludes and acid and whatever they were doing in the 70s.
Right.
And getting in trouble with the law, being arrested. So he was a troubled kid, you know, and he had done his fair share of dumb shit, for lack of a better description. And me, also 1 year prior to that, our cousin Mark, who was only 17 and roughly, you know, closer to my brother's age, he was killed in a car accident and was with friends, loud music, drinking, driving late at night, crazy, gets killed. So there was a lot of death in my family at an early age. And I think my cousin Mark and my brother, you know, they both had long hair, and who knows, they were listening to whatever and doing whatever. Both of them had a short life. And so subconsciously, I think that planted itself within me. And that's why to this day, as I approach my 60th birthday, I've never been drunk one time in my life.
Yeah.
Never been drunk. I've never done one line of cocaine in my life. Not a smoker, not a pot smoker. Had I taken a drag off a cigarette as a teenager, as a kid along the way? Sure. Never bought a pack, never smoked a full cigarette. And of course, I did pot a couple times, did pot, smoked it. I think the first or second time was probably with my sister, who was even younger than me. I'm like 16 and she's 14 and a half. Her brother, her boyfriend was a big pothead. And I took a hit off his joint in his car, and I sat in the back seat and laughed for like a half an hour. So pretty limited exposure when it came to that, and that was a decision made by me, you know.
That's like, because my stepdad was an alcoholic, and I used to swear I'm never gonna do that. My mom smoked. I swore I was never gonna do that.
Right.
And lo and behold, I ended up doing both of them. But so if I understand right, it's March of '84 when everything changes. You go see Ozzy Osbourne and Motley Crue is opening. What happened that night?
Well, I did go to a concert a couple weeks before that, and again, a lot of my friends were listening to Def Leppard, Loverboy, all this stuff. And I remember my friend saying, "Hey, we're going to go to see Kiss." I didn't know anything about Kiss, and this is post makeup, so we go to see the Lick It Up concert in Green Bay, probably February 15th or something, 1984. Vinnie Vincent's in the band. I think Heaven and Vandenberg were the two openers.
Yeah.
And then Kiss came out. And I do remember watching the show and thinking that Vinnie Vincent was the coolest guy in the band, you know? I mean, he had all these pink boots and the guitar, and he's running around. And Gene was looking like the you know, all respect, I love Gene, but he was looking like the not so impressive looking older Gene from the movies, you know, no makeup, just sitting up there, you know. And I'm like, this guy looks like he's 50, you know. He's like 35 at the time, but he seemed like he was 100 to me.
Right.
Went to that concert. It is what it is. Didn't really do anything. Had fun though. A couple weeks later, my friend said, "We're going to see Ozzy." I said, "Yeah, that's the guy that eats bats. I'm going to go. I want to check it out." I had no idea. I knew nothing about Ozzy. I really didn't. If somebody would have said, "Who's the guitar player that got killed 2 years ago?" I would have had no idea. I didn't know who Randy Rhoads was.
No.
I didn't know who Brad Gillis was. I didn't know any of that stuff. And of course, I didn't know Jake either. But we go to the Bark at the Moon tour. The opening band is some band that's just coming out called Motley Crue. I didn't even know how to say their name. I saw the umlauts above the name, and it's like some German European thing. I had no idea. But when they came out, the lights went down and the intro for In the Beginning started. I don't know, something just happened. And it was general admission. I was from here to that bedroom wall. I was 6 feet from the stage. And the first thing I saw was this, at the time, I didn't know what it was, but it was a red hammer bass. And it was just Nicky, you know, and Mick's over there, and Tommy's up there, like fucking like this. And then Vince runs out, and the place just went crazy. I mean, and the girls were screaming bloody murder. And all he was doing was just standing there with his long blonde hair and tan self. And then he started telling everybody, you know, are you ready to fucking rock and roll? And the whole place just I was possessed.
Yeah.
Instantly, March 8th, 1984, that was the turning point. At this point, I had short feathered hair. I worked at a donut shop. I skateboarded, listened to Oingo Boingo and Devo pretty much nonstop. Um, and now I'm like, I want to be a singer. I want my hair long. I want to join a band. When's the next concert? And I'd start going to music stores and looking through the heavy metal section.
Yeah.
Wasp, oh my God, I'm buying this. You know,
Yeah.
Steeler, you know, I'm buying that. Black and Blue, Dokken, Rat, you know, and it just, I became obsessed, possessed, and just dove head first. That was it.
So is it like how long after that? I think your first band is Exciter.
Yep.
How long after that Motley Crue show do you start joining bands?
Well, we had kind of started jamming, and I guess there was already guys jamming and doing stuff. I was just on the peripheral.
Okay.
And then it was like, I think it was Mike Schneider, who was the bass player from Exciter, and he's like, "Hey man, we're going to this guy's house in West Haven. They're doing a jam on Saturday." And I'm like, "I want to go." So Mike's a bass player. Another kid named Mike's a bass player. Mike Stowe is playing guitar. A kid named Darren Durant is playing guitar. Somebody had a keyboard. You know, there was, I think Dan Lautenschlager, nicknamed Goober, was there. Maybe he was one of the drummers. It was like 3 drummers, 3 bass players, 4 guitarists, a keyboardist, and no singers. And at this point, everybody's just in the garage. You know, there's a couple neighborhood girls. And then it was like, "Do you know Breaking the Law? Do you know Breaking the Law?" Okay, you know, hey, let's do Breaking the Law. So like 4 or 5 guys would all join in. Halfway through, it'd be a train wreck. They're like, "Let's do Living After Midnight instead," you know. And then they're playing the Romantics, you know, Talking in Your Sleep. Or
Right.
so it was just that was happening on the weekends, and it was at one of those where some guy got up and started singing to a song, and I don't remember what it was, but he wasn't any good. And I said, "I want to sing one," you know, and they're like, "Okay." And somebody was starting to play White Wedding by Billy Idol. So I was like, "I'll sing that," you know. So I'm up there like, "It's a nice day for a white wedding," you know, and all the girls started kind of squealing, you know. And I remember a couple of the guys, it might even have been Schneider, who's like, "Dude, they love you. Dude, you're the singer." And I'm like, "I know. Fuck yeah, I'm the singer," you know. So that was the beginning of those jams. And it was like on the weekend or, you know, after school in someone's garage or basement. But it wasn't until the spring of 85 that I got on stage for the first time. So spring of 85 was my first time on stage with Exciter, which is just over 40 years ago.
Okay. So what,
Yeah.
I mean, what happens with Exciter? Because I've seen, shoot, you have like Exciter, I've seen pictures, you have Exciter shirts on Metal Sludge. Like what ended up happening with them?
So Exciter, at this point, it was Mike Schneider was the bass player. Mike Stowe was the guitar player. Rest in peace. Mike Stowe, I believe, had a heart attack about 15 or 20 years ago and sadly died. He was the guitarist. And a kid named Dan Lautenschlager, nicknamed Goober, was the drummer. So it was us 4. And we started playing out. We're all from Oshkosh, and we all went from Oshkosh West High School, and we played like the local, you know, charity muscular dystrophy event at like some VFW hall, and tickets were $3. And our set was like Judas Priest, maybe an REO Speedwagon song, Fastway, Helix, maybe a Van Halen song, but it was like You Really Got Me, technically a Kink song. A Black Sabbath song like War Pigs or Paranoid or something. I think those guys, you know, a couple of the guys like Dan was really big into Iron Maiden, but I definitely couldn't sing that.
Yeah.
But at some point, I think we were doing like 22 Acacia Avenue off of Peace of Mind. It was just all over the board. We did we did the Romantics, you know, so it was just cover band stuff, but we were all young, you know, I mean, 16, 17, 18 years old. And we just started playing like little teen clubs and arcades. And we also started playing in a couple of band bars. And then there was the WAPL Battle of the Bands, which that was the big radio station from Appleton. So one year we said, let's enter it. And in the first round, it was mainly younger bands, and we won that round. So of course we were riding high. Then we go to the next round, but we lose to some band that was, you know, way more seasoned, mature, way older, you know, like 25, you know, those old people. And so, but like anything, you know, there was a point when Mike, the guitarist, was like, hey, I got to go to this wedding, or I'm getting a haircut. I remember he told us he was getting a haircut. And I pulled Schneider aside. I go, did he say he's getting a haircut? Dude, he's out of the band.
Right.
End of story.
Right.
You're getting a haircut, you're gone, you know? And him and me were kind of like this. So then we ended up replacing him with a guy named Jason Giordano, who's from Menasha. And we went and met with him. We saw his little advertisement at a music store. It said, you know, guitarist available, like Motley, Rat, Dawkins, you know, Ingve, whatever. So we go meet the guy. He's got a George Lynch Bengal Tiger Charvel, kind of like what Satchel would use in Steel Panther.
Yeah.
And so we go meet with him, and he played us like Looks That Kill and some other songs on the guitar. And we were going to leave. And I remember Schneid saying, we should keep looking. And we're in the car. I go, dude, did you see his guitar? He's in the band. Like, I mean, it sounds like something Steel Panther would say in one of their you know, skits.
Yeah.
But it's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Haircut, out of the band. Charvel guitar, you're in the band. You know, so that's what really mattered, you know, to a bunch of kids who were technically teenagers at that point. And so that went on for a year and a half. Couple of different formations, guys in and out, you know, us arguing about stupid crap. And within a couple of years, I started to realize I need to make a move.
Yeah.
Because I think I was going 180 miles an hour. Even if everybody else was going 100, I was going 150 or 200.
Yeah.
And I was already, you know, I wanted to play Milwaukee or Chicago. And I remember somebody we were playing with was like, Chicago, that's like 3 hours away. And I'm like, 3 hours away? Like, I'm going on tour. I'm going to go around the world.
Yeah.
You know, I can't be stressed out about you not wanting to drive 3 hours. So by that point, I had my sights set on LA, but it wasn't, quote, meant to be yet, you know?
So what is the thing that makes you purchase a fucking one-way ticket with no option to come back to go to California in 87?
Yeah, so I knew a couple of girls, 3 actually, all who were from Wisconsin, all that I had at some point or another had relations with, and they had all come out to LA. 2 of them were living here. One of them just came back and forth a few times, and they all said, they're like, Steve, you got to come out here. This place is ready for you. Like, this is prime where you need to be. And this was like late 1986. Poison had already put out their record, but it hadn't exploded yet. And I had just went to go see them in concert in like, I think it was like September of 86. So their record was out for 3 months. Cry Tuff was on late night on MTV, and they had a couple little blurbs and like Faces and Metal Edge and Rock Scene. But that was when I first discovered them. And I thought, wow, they're kind of like a mix of like Motley Crue and Van Halen, only younger and even crazier, you know, and they had great sing-along songs. Yeah. But my friend Pam, a girl I named Julie, and my high school sweetheart named Jolene, all 3 of those girls were out here telling me I need to come out here. And I remember them telling me about, there's a band called Warrant, they're awesome, you know, and telling me about these other bands. I remember hearing about St. Valentine, which was a band that Mark Simon was in, who ended up being the bass player in Wildside. So all of these things were being thrown at me, and then a buddy of mine had come out to visit in the spring of '87 in April or May. His name was Al, and he was a drummer. So he came out here. I didn't even know had come out. He was here for a month, went through a bunch of money, came home, and he calls me and he said, Steve, I went to Hollywood. Oh my God, it's amazing. This was a Friday, and he said, "You got to come over. I got to tell you all these stories." So I literally drove straight to his house. We go into his drum room, and he goes, "Check this out." And he handed me a stack of like magazines, flyers. At the time, I didn't know what they were, but it was like, Rock City News and BAM and LA Weekly, and then just this huge amount of all these colorful flyers and tickets and promo items. And I'm going through them all. And I remember seeing Hit and Run, Rankest Tide, 22 Ski-Doo, Heavy, Rock Dolls, like all these different, and everybody looked cool, and there was killer logos. And then all of a sudden there's a Tuff flyer. And the Tuff flyer had that great logo, a picture of George, a picture of Michael, a picture of Todd, and an empty square. And in the square it said wanted lead singer, influences David Lee Roth, Vince Neil, Brett Michaels, Robin Zander, Billy Idol, all the blonde hair rock and roll frontmen. And I was like, that's me. That's my gig, literally in an instant. I said, Al, can I have this flyer? He was like, yeah, take it all. Take that stuff, I said, I want to call this band. So I went home that night. I called the number, and their phone number was disconnected. But they endorsed this rehearsal studio that they rehearsed at called Rocking Horse Studios in Canoga Park. And it's like where all the rock stars rehearse, Rocking Horse, Canoga Park, blah, blah, 818, blah, blah. So I was like, I'm going to call that number. So I called that number and I said, hey, I'm trying to reach Tuff. And they said, well, they're not rehearsing today. I said, I heard they're looking for a singer. I'm from Wisconsin. My name is Steve. I'm interested. And they said, well, if you need, you can send a press kit to us and we'll give it to them when they get here. This is on a Friday night. So I said, okay. So the next day on Saturday, I had some disposable cameras, those little yellow Kodak ones. Yeah. And I started taking pictures of myself. I'm like, put on some beads and a headband, and I'm in my bedroom taking photos, went and got them all developed. I've shared some of those very photos on my Facebook.
I'll have them here because
it's the one where I'm wearing like the big red Oakley kind of Nikki Sixx goggles, and some I'm wearing a purple headband. So I did this, selfie photo shoot by myself before the word selfie even existed. And then I had a couple of demos. Exciter had done a couple of demos, 3-song demos at like the local college with the, weekend thing. Weren't that great though. And I started putting it all together, and they're like, send a resume and a bio and any press clippings. And I had like, a couple of newspaper clippings, but I was like, this stuff's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. I got to go. So that Saturday, I put a hose in my waterbed, threw the other end in the drain, started loading all my stuff out of my room, because I rented a room at an apartment with 3 roommates, 2 girls and me, so kind of Three's Company-ish. It was near the college, but it was a month-to-month college thing. So I just loaded my car up, took it to my house. I'm unloading everything to my mom's basement. She's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm moving to California. She said, when? I said, I think next week. She's like, what do you mean? What about your band? I was like, fuck my band. I'm joining a new one, So I had a waterbed because I worked at a waterbed factory, and I knew it would take overnight for all the water to drain. That's why I quick put the hose in it on Saturday.
Right.
By Sunday, it's drained. I break it down, take it all to my mom's house. And on Monday, I went to Oshkosh Fox Valley Travel and bought a one-way ticket for $106. I still have the receipt. It's in the Tuff Tour diaries. And I flew from Midway Airport on June 25th, connected in Phoenix to LAX. And that was a Thursday night. 6 days after I saw the flyer, I was already here.
And if I understand right, the next night you go see Angora with John Corabi.
Yep.
And how do you then, I mean, you show up, but you have no fucking resume. Like, how do you convince the tough guys that you're the guy?
Well, I get to town on the Thursday night. My friend Pam takes me. I'm staying at her house. She lives in Van Nuys on a street called Sherman Way near Hazeltine. And she says, my neighbors are in a band. I'll take you over there. You can meet them. They know a lot of people. That they're good guys. And I said, okay. So this is an hour. I'm out of the plane an hour. I'm at her house, her apartment. And she goes, oh, by the way, Robert Sarzo lives downstairs. I'm like, I don't know who that is. She goes, that's Rudy Sarzo's brother. He's the guitarist from Hurricane.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? Like, he lived in the apartment below her. She goes, well, I'm going to go take you to meet my friends. So I go meet Freddie Laszlo, and Greg Waziljan from a band called Crystal Gem from San Jose. But they're now living in LA. They've been here a couple of years. And she's like, hey, this is my friend Steve, blah, blah, blah. He's in a band. He's coming out here. And Fred's on the couch. Fred's still my buddy today. I love him. He's on the couch. He's like, singer, huh? Cool. Okay, what do you got? Let's go. Let me hear it. I'm like, he's like, come on, dude. You freeze it up, man. This is Hollywood. This is the big time. Let's go, bro. Give it to me right now. You don't need a band. What do you got? And I'm like, is this fucking guy kidding? Greg's like, dude, fucking fuck him, ignore him. They're like, dude, we'll show you around, cool, just busting your balls, But Greg and Fred, they said, we'll take you to a rock show tomorrow. They took me to Angora, took me in the dressing room. They were friends with them. I met Karabi that night. I didn't know any of these guys, obviously. I'm a newbie, but they took me in the dressing room. I met John. John still to this day remembers meeting me that first night, and we remained friends ongoing. And Fred and Greg were the guys that showed me the initial ropes. Also, upon arriving, I called the studio, the Canoga Park place. Hey, it's Steve from Wisconsin. I want to talk to the tough guys. They're like, did you ever send a package? And I'm like, no, I didn't. But I'm here. I'm in the Valley, in Van Nuys. This is where I'm at. So they then give the message to the band. Fred and Greg also said, do you have a job? I said, no. They're like, you're working with us Monday morning, 6 a.m. Be ready. I was like, okay. So I had fun that weekend. And on Monday morning, I was in a car going to a phone sales room in Culver City. Had no idea where that was, but we were sitting in traffic for an hour.
Yeah.
Start doing phone sales. And later that day in the afternoon, Greg comes up to me and says, hey, somebody's trying to reach you. I go pick up a phone and it's Michael. He's like, hey, this is Michael from Tuff. We heard you're trying to get a hold of us. Yeah. And I said, yeah, I'm from Wisconsin. And he said, how long is your hair and what do you look like? Not, can you sing? How long have you been taking lessons? I was like, well, everybody says I look like the guy from Poison. And now it's June of '87. Poison's Talk Dirty to Me came out around Christmas or January. So they'd only just started blowing up about 6 months before this, becoming a nationally known band. Yep. But I said, I have blonde hair. Everyone used to say I was like a David Lee Roth kind of guy, whatever. They're like, okay, where do you live? I tell him. And he says, Sherman Way in Hazeltine. I said, yeah, the apartment is like near that corner. He goes, we live off Van Owen in Hazeltine. Now, to me, I have no idea what that means, but to anybody that grew up in the Valley or knows the Valley, Sherman Way and Van Owen parallel like this. Hazeltine is like this. Basically, I'm in this apartment. They're in an apartment here. It's walkable.
Right.
It's like 3/4 of a mile. And the craziness of that is Los Angeles is the second most populated city in North America. I could have landed in Orange County, San Dimas, Glendale, Ventura, Santa Monica, Hollywood, Long Beach, Burbank, North. I could have landed in 50 different random suburb areas. I literally was 5 blocks away from their house.
Yeah.
So it was kind of meant to be, I guess.
Like when you go see Angora and you meet these people, is there any part of you that's like, holy shit, I don't know if I can do this?
Well, honestly, when John and his band came out, I did say to myself, wow, they're really good. Yeah. I mean, it was like seeing like Cinderella or something. John had that whiskey drenched voice. They looked cool. I mean, it it was on. It was great, you know. And of course, there's a lot of other great bands and players, and you know, even the way guys looked was intimidating. And you go see that, it's like, wow, all this promo. This guy's got 4 stacks. Look at that drum set. Holy shit, they got backdrops and pyro, and didn't intimidate me in the least. I'm like, okay, pretty good. Give me a shot.
Right.
Let me get the microphone.
Right.
Get the fuck out of my way from the beginning. And that's the way I always was. And I don't know if it's, call it arrogance or cockiness or confidence. I remember when I was an Exciter and I did that very first show, the sound man was an old man. He was probably 35, you know, but he was a little gray and a little balding. And I remember he came up to me after we did our like 5 songs and he said, "You got charisma, kid. You got something." I didn't even know what the word meant, you know, but very early on, every time I played, whether it was an older club owner or promoter or manager, I think they saw something in me. And I don't say that to boast or brag. It's just, it is what it is. You know, there's certain things that guys have, and then there's that little hidden it factor. You know, Sebastian Bach walking into the room at that point, forget about it. You know, game over. Look at the guy, you know, listen to his voice. Look at the way he presents himself. And the same applied with a Jani Lane, you know, Motley Crue, Van Halen, you know, Bon Jovi. And while Tuff did not ascend to those heights, we were one of those bands that were definitely rumbling, you know, underneath, where people were like, this could explode, you know. And I guess I was part of that. And so, yeah, there was no intimidation. Michael very early on said, dude, Michael was younger than all of us. He was a teenager himself. I was 21 when I joined the band. Todd and George were 20. But Michael said, your competition is not 22 Skidoo or Taz or Hit and Run or even Warrant or Brunette. Your competition is John Bon Jovi, Steven Tyler, David Lee Roth, Vince Neil. You know, that's where we're putting ourselves there. Smoking a bunch of local bands and saying we're better than you, that's not an accomplishment. You know, like, we were pushing ourselves. It's just like you know, an Olympic athlete. You know, they're not striving to just win the local regional race. They want to win the state and then the national and then the international and go to the Olympics. The goal is to be, you know, at the next level. So no, there was no intimidation by not only not me, but none of the guys in our band. We were all very confident, focused, and ready.
So after you get there and you said, like, Michael called you at work, like what is the process they put you through until they say, yes, you are the guy?
So that's Monday. They said, tomorrow's not going to work. We'll come and meet you on Wednesday night. So 48 hours later, and less than a week after I had arrived, they said, we'll come to your apartment tonight. So it was 8 o'clock that night. They come to the apartment, Pam's place. They come in, and Todd, George, and Michael walk in. They're all dressed to the nines. And we just started, you know, chopping it up, so to speak. They're like, oh, here's our EP. They had the shrink wrapped, manufactured, you know, Tough Muff Records, Knock Yourself Out cassette EP, you know, factory manufactured, recorded at Baby O Studios. Like, it looked like, you know, something I would have bought in a record store. All their flyers, they had a press kit where they had press already, just a lot of endorsements. Everything was just rolling, you know. And they gave it all to me, and I said, oh, this is cool. Hey, this is my demo. And it's on, you know, on a Memorex, you know, 90-minute cassette tape. And I said, let's listen to mine instead. You know, so even though they had all this stuff happening, I was like trying to shove me down their throat. And I played them a couple of Exciter songs, and they were listening. They're like, yeah, you have a cool voice. And, you know, asked me maybe how old I was, you know, whatever, you know. So we just talked about stuff, and they said, okay, learn these 6 songs. They gave me lyric sheets, everything. And they said, we'll rehearse in like in a week, not in a couple days, because Michael had to leave town. And they said it was, I don't know, business, but it turned out Michael had already had a baby he had a son that was back in Phoenix. Michael had a kid when he was a teenager. So while he was gone for that week, I started hanging out with Todd Chase. So that weekend, me and Chase hung out, even though I hadn't jammed with them. He brought me to their apartment. There was girls coming over buying us food. We ended up screwing a couple chicks together, the whole deal. And then it was the following Wednesday, which was July 7th, I think, where we rehearsed. After that rehearsal, they did not give me the gig. They took me back to Pam's apartment, dropped me off, and said, we'll let you know what's up. So a couple days goes by, and then they said, we want to audition you one more time this Saturday. And I said, okay. So then I went with them again on Saturday, and after about 3 or 4 songs, they said, hey, we're gonna go have a meeting in the parking lot and have a cigarette. You got to stay here. And I was like, okay. So I waited in the room. They went and had a smoke, and then they came in like 10 minutes later, and Todd Chase was the one who said, hey man, we want you to be our light man. And I said, fuck you. And he goes, nah, we're just kidding, dude. We want you to be our singer, But I did tell them to fuck off. I had a feeling they were fucking with me, but yeah, they said, you're going to be our singer. That was July 11th, and I'm pretty sure it was a Saturday. So from there, it was game on.
Yeah. So when you get the job, you're like, or they are like, you can't be Steve Hanseter, so you need to come up with a stage name.
Steve, yeah. So I remember that. So then we're talking, and then they said I could move in their apartment too, which was great because they had a 2-bedroom apartment, me and Michael in one room, Todd and George in the other. And it was only like, a few blocks, literally walkable from where I was. And all I had was a suitcase. But they're like, hey, what's your stage name? And I'm like, Steve Lox's. And they're like, Lox's? What's Lox's? And I go, oh, it's the word sexual spelled backwards. And they're like, that's not going to work. They're like, dude, that's the fucking dumbest fucking stage name.
Okay.
And then Michael was the one who suggested, why don't you be Stevie instead of Steve? Because there's already Steve Stevens, Steven Tyler, Stephen Piercy, there's no Stevies in rock. I mean, you got Stevie Nicks and Stevie Wonder, but it was Michael that said, why don't you be Stevie? So I said, okay. And then I started messing around with different names. And my childhood sweetheart, her middle name was Rachel. So at some point I took her middle name and it was going to be Stevie Rachelle, which kind of morphed into Stevie Rachelle. So that's how I got my stage name.
Okay. And
yeah,
like, if you read, and everyone should go read the Tuff diaries at Metal Sludge, because I just have pored over those so many times. But Michael was what, 18 or 19?
Yeah, Michael's birthday is December 67. I'm March 66. I was 21. Todd and George both turned 20 later that year, or turned 21 later that year in 87. Michael was 19 when I joined.
And
He had a kid when he was 18.
And you said like he had all the finances. He took you out and got you clothes and everything when you joined the band.
And hair extensions.
And hair extensions.
Yeah, Michael was very smart. Michael also was Jim Gillette was the singer before me.
Yep.
Jim Gillette was in the band for about a year and a half. And when they moved to LA, they did 4 shows with Jimmy. Troubadour, Country Club. There's a Country Club video that they did. They opened up for a band. I don't even know who it was. But the Country Club would hold about 1,200 people. I have a video of their show from 1986, and there's like not 10 people in the building. There's literally like 5 people in front of the stage. This place is like, a small theater, it's huge.
Yeah.
So, but Jimmy didn't want to do the band anymore. He wanted to go solo and do all his, a lot more screaming and fast metal and stuff. But it was Michael and Jimmy came up with the idea to do Metal Power, the vocal lessons.
Yep.
which was kind of his idea, was to basically take Doug Marks's metal method guitar lessons and apply everything that Doug did with guitar, only Jimmy would do it with his voice. So
Yeah.
Jimmy was going to take lessons from this opera singer, and the woman would be like, okay, Jim, today we're going to do this. And like anybody who knows that takes lessons, you're encouraged to tape each one of your lessons with the teacher. And then you take home that 1 hour tape and you listen to it and go over it and rehearse it and play it, whatever. So while she's doing that, she's playing her piano. Okay, Jim, now do this scale. La 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 la, and all these different scales and me, whatever. All this is on tape, and Jim has the idea. He says, "Hey, Michael, I have an idea. I'm going to take everything she's teaching me and apply it to a tape, take some cool photos, and sell the vocal lessons online or in magazines."
Yeah.
Michael says, "Cool, I'll help you finance it. Let's be partners." Jimmy is also, I think he's younger than Michael. So they're like 18 years old in 1986, 17, 18. Jimmy might have only been 17. And he created that concept to do Jim Gillette's Metal Power. And then it turns into full page ads in magazines, and it's become a thing over the years. They sold a ton, they made a ton of money. So Michael and Jimmy were very, very, very business minded. And still to this day, both of those guys are extremely successful.
Yeah.
Very.
And so Tuff did have a fairly well established name before you even came in.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
It was presented as such, and the mindset was at that level. But their shows, they were not a headliner.
Okay.
They definitely weren't getting paid.
Right.
They played the Gazzari's Club once or twice, the Troubadour, and they were starting to be seen and heard around the Strip. But it wasn't established. Like per se, when Warrant was playing locally with Adam singing, Max playing drums, Eric and Jerry and Josh on guitars and bass, they had already been a band for 2 or 3 years, but had started to climb some of the ranks. They opened for Poison,
Yeah.
and Guns N' Roses opened for them. And they had already had a little bit of definitely a pretty solid local name.
Yeah.
Plain Jane, that Janie was in, was much further down the totem pole. They had played shows, but they weren't making any real noise.
Right.
But when Max and Adam left the band, Eric and Jerry said, "We need a singer." And they said, "Let's get that guy from the Plain Jane band." And it just so happened that because the drummer left too, Janie said, I want to bring my drummer, Steven. They said, "Cool, we need both." Then when Janie and Steven got in Warrant went to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that when I got in Tuff,
Yeah.
the same thing happened.
And speaking of Warrant, your first show is opening for Warrant, correct?
Correct. We opened for, it was a 5-band bill. There was a first band, I think it was Kramer. Tuff was second. Paradise was third, and that's the 2 dice with Paul Lancia, Billy DeVette, Dave Marshall, Nick Masella, and Daz Bash on drums.
Is this that
Warrant-
ad?
Pardon?
Is this that ad?
Yes. Does that say Kramer in the bottom left? Is that what the band was?
Satir, Kramer. Yep. Paradise.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and so one of those bands, I think it was Satir, was the closing band. A lot of times what a club like the Roxy would do, or Gazzari's, they would have 5 bands. First slot, second slot, support. Your headliner was fourth, and then you had a closer or a mop-up band.
Yeah.
So by the time the headliner's done, a lot of people would leave, and then the last band would be kind of playing to crickets or people in the backstage area. But on that show, Tuff's first show with me, we were second slot on the Warrant bill at the Roxy. That was August 26th of 87, right?
Yeah. August 21st, I think.
21st.
Yeah. I mean, I'm shocked that you can remember this stuff as well as you can. I mean, the dates specifically.
Some of it's in my brain.
Yeah.
Some of it's a little faded, you know.
So what is that first show? I mean, when you get done, are you like, yes, I knocked it out of the park? Or are you like, ah, shit, I got to work on some stuff?
No, when we got done, I was in the dressing room and I'm feeling like $1 million, and a couple of guys are in there, and I'm sitting on a couch, and I said, "Dude, help me pull these boots off." And the guy looks at me like, "Huh?" I said, "Dude, I can't get these off. Pull these off for me." I pull, He grabs my Jerry Dixon took my boots off for me. I had no idea who he was, you know, because
Right.
I hadn't met any of these guys yet.
Right.
But the way the Roxy's set up is there's a double dressing room. There's one side over here and one side over here with two separate doors, but you can go through them and they connect with like a closet hallway in the back. And the headliner's dressing room, we happened to be in there. They would have like the first, third, and fifth band on this side and the second and the fourth. So actually, we ended up sharing the dressing room with Warrant because we were second.
Mhm.
Then there was a band in between us. And then they were coming in at some point. We were still in there. And then Warrant was the fourth band. But I don't know. It was great. I mean, from that moment, things just really took off. Like our name, and there's two kinds of people. There's the people that were there and know, and then there's the people that are the haters that are going, that never happened. But
Right.
Tuff absolutely became a very big band very quickly. And it was within months that people were like, okay, after Warrant, it's Tuff. You know, you had Racer X with Paul Gilbert. That was obviously a big band. There was some others, but Tuff's ascent was just literally almost straight up out of the box. I mean, our third show, we headlined and got paid. We played the Roxy with Warrant in August. Then we played, I think, a show in Phoenix. Then we played the Troubadour in September or October. And then in November, we headlined the Whiskey and got paid $500. And the promoter was Razzmatazz, also known as Jani Lane, who later became Mrs. Eddie Van Halen. That
Yeah.
was Eddie's wife when he died, Janie.
Yeah.
Sweetheart of a girl, too. She was our first promoter, and that was our first headlining show, November of '87.
And I think I saw some pictures of her. What a smoke show. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Great person, great human.
At some point in this time, you're approached by Penelope Spheris
Yep.
about appearing in a movie, Decline of Western Civilization, Part 2, The Metal Years. Like how did that come about? What do you remember about making that?
I just remember being on the Strip, which the Strip was exactly like you saw it in that documentary and other footage you might have seen online. Just throngs of people outside all the clubs. We're walking along, flyers. I have this girl with me whose name was Michelle. She's in the clip or two with me outside, little blonde.
Yep.
And I just remember a camera crew coming up and a lady saying, "Hey, I want to interview you. What's your name? What are you doing?" And it was Penelope. And I said, "My name is Stevie Rachelle. I'm with this band called Tuff." And she's like, "I want your number. I want to interview you in the studio too." So we got interviewed on the Strip
Yep.
outside of Gazzari's is where that was. And then later on, I don't know if it was a week later or 2 weeks later, me and Michael went to a sound stage on Sunset Boulevard where we were interviewed. That's the room where we're in with the light bulb and just me and Michael are sitting there.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Penelope was very supportive. She liked us, liked me, I think, from the beginning. She was very into us. And I do remember that when that actually premiered in early '88, it was played at the Cinerama Dome, very famous theater on Sunset Boulevard, and everybody was there. All the guys from the bigger bands included, Kiss, Megadeth, whoever. So we're sitting there watching the movie, do the red carpet, and then afterwards, Penelope comes up to me and she says, "Stevie, during the film, when you came on the screen, Gene Simmons said, 'Who is that?' And she said, 'That's Stevie from Tuff.'" And he's like, "Okay." And then I came up in another clip and she said that Gene goes, "Hey, what is that kid's name again?" And she goes, "That's Stevie Rachelle. He's from Tuff." And Gene told her, "That kid's a star." And she came up to me afterwards and she's like, "Stevie, Gene Simmons couldn't stop talking about you. This and that. Oh my God, blah, blah." And me, again, with this little bit of Oshkosh arrogance, I'm like, "Oh yeah, cool. That's great. Whatever." She's like, "You don't understand, Stevie. He's a very powerful man." And I was like, "Yeah, great, cool. Kiss is awesome. Whatever." I just kind of, I guess I appreciated it. And I guess it wasn't lost on me, but I probably can look back and acknowledge and appreciate that it was probably much more of a valuable little thing happening
Yeah.
that I was kind of unaware of.
Yeah.
it's like Gene liking me as opposed to a bunch of blonde girls. That's a difference, you know? Yeah, of course the girls like me. This guy's a massive star that's been a rock star for a decade and sold millions of records. And if he takes notice and says, who is that?
Yeah.
He's a star. Maybe I'll work with him.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a good friendship to have, which later on came into play, you know?
Looking back on the decline, do you think that hurt the scene? Because a lot of people feel like the scene was portrayed very negatively.
I don't think at all. You know, here's the thing. Everyone can't be serious.
Yeah.
You know, Dave Mustaine's been writing lyrics about politics and government and whatever for all. Good for you, Dave. You know, I'm not driving around, you know, with my hair looks like a semi went by me. It's just like, well, good. You know, fucking be angry and sing about fucking government and peace. That's your thing. Poison's whole thing was nothing but a good time. Let's have fun.
Yep.
You know, and what was happening in Los Angeles at that time in the 80s will never be replicated again. It was fun. It was positive. It was upbeat. It was a party. Everyone's having a good time. Everybody was making money. The 90s were different, you know, and there was different types of music in the 90s, but the grunge scene and a lot of the depressing kind of dreary stuff that was happening, it was a different thing, you know, and no disrespect to them, but you know, our era got plenty of disrespect. It still gets disrespect. People, you know, make fun of things. Hey, Metal Sludge made a lot of fun too, but there's a difference. You know, I'm in the room. I'm also busting my own balls.
Yeah.
You know, I was on the penis chart for having a big dick, but I was also on the hair club for men chart for being fucking bald and having hair transplants or going bald, you know?
Yep.
So I can dish it out.
Yep.
I can also take it. You know, there's some guys in the industry that can't take it or they're offended. Oh my God, you said some bad things about me. It's like, get a helmet, you fucking bitch. Move over, you know? So what Metal Sludge did was no different than what, you know, Howard Stern did or even Saturday Night Live, making fun and poking fun at people. There's no true cruelty or harm meant, you know? It's not like we were going up and beating people up, you know? It's like, we made fun of you, big deal. You know, at some point you deserved it.
Yeah. When did the label interest start happening?
I mean, right away.
Okay.
But, you know, obviously we were getting passed on, which is the same thing that, you know, Poison said, every label passed, you know, Warrant got passed on. Everybody did.
Yeah.
Cinderella, every band that at some point got a record deal had some other manager or agent or label tell them, you're not going anywhere. It's not going to work. Need a different singer. Stuff's too weird, you know? You know, there's all different ways to approach the thing. We did showcases like I've heard guys on your channel talk about. We've done the showcase, the one that Steve Sinclair from Mechanic, you guys in Trickster talked about. We did a showcase for Steve Sinclair and his you know, rest in peace to Steve.
Yeah.
And his girlfriend Elisa Cassis and Mechanic Records, that Howie Huberman, pretty sure Howie set it up. We did this showcase at this big club in the middle of the day for 3 people. It wasn't one of the popular clubs. It was like some venue somewhere in downtown LA, but you know, a 600-700 seat club, huge stage. We go out and do a full show in front of 3 people. It's not easy to do that, you know? But at the end of the day, Mechanic ended up signing Trickster. Yeah. And I guess they were looking at Tuff and Trickster kind of at the same time, but Trickster got the deal. And there was another time we did a rehearsal showcase for some people from some labels. I forget which labels it was, but again, full setup. We got our gear, we're dressed up, we got our backdrops, we got all kinds of merchandise printed and shirts and press and 8x10s. And we give it to these 3 or 4 guys. They're all sitting in the chairs like this. And we play a full set. And it's in a rehearsal room, not a full sound stage. So the room's, you know, 20 by 40, and they're just on 3 or 4 folding chairs in front of us. After about 6 songs, they're like, okay, we're good. And I'm like, so guys, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, you guys need a lot of work. These songs aren't very good. And I'm like, well, we got to, no, that's not very good, you know. And so after like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of uncomfortable back and forth, they're like, well, hey, thanks for inviting us. We appreciate it. A handshake and all the stuff we gave them, all the shirts and the press kits were sitting on the chairs when they all walked out. So, they weren't impressed. But that's nothing new. All of us have went through that, just like actors go through auditions or athletes go to try out for a football team.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan was cut, right? So
You always said that you and Michael were straight edge. Like Michael might have a beer or two, but Todd and George, outside of heroin, pretty much anything was game. Did that
Yep.
like were they was the drugs and alcohol kept in check in those years, and was there animosity between the two sides?
I wouldn't say animosity. I mean, we busted each other's balls. Me and Michael would get up at the crack of dawn. Michael would wake me up. It'd be 7 o'clock. He'd already been up for an hour. Michael would be up at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Chain smoking at his typewriter. Writing another press release or something. He's like, "We got to go, dude. We got stuff to do." So I'd throw on some sweatpants, put my hair in a ponytail. We'd pull out the door. We'd go get a big gulp or some donuts at a 7-Eleven, and we'd be in his van busting to Hollywood, going to pick up flyers or get something printed or pick up magazines or go to meetings. We'd be doing this all day long. We'd come home at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and Todd and George would be like, "What time is it?" They'd literally be waking up at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
Right.
And me and Mike would just shake our head. So it never interfered with the band.
Okay.
Meaning when rehearsal was there, they were there.
Yeah.
Shows, they were there. Hey, we got to do promo. They were involved, but they were definitely two, those guys were Ace and Peter.
Yeah.
And me and Michael were Paul and Gene. That's what I've always said, Those guys were smoking and drinking and snorting and partying and going to bed at 4 or 5 in the morning and waking up at 3. And that just wasn't what me and Michael were doing. But when it came time for us four to be a team, we were,
Yeah.
And it was probably a good mixture, just like with Kiss in the early days. It was like you got the good friction, the bad friction, the clean, the dirty, and we just it opposites attract, whatever you want to call it. It worked. That 4-piece that was us. That's why the band worked.
You said that some people after the show, it was like, okay, I'm gonna go find my pot or my Coke or whatever.
Yep.
And for you, it was always the women, and you've been pretty open about that. Like,
Yeah.
did you ever, and you write in pretty graphic detail on the Tuff Diaries. Were you ever concerned about sharing all the stuff that you did?
You mean, was I concerned now, later in life, sharing it?
Later in life, I guess, about sharing all the escapades that you had.
Yeah, am I going to get canceled or something? I mean, no. I mean, it is what it is. I didn't rape anybody.
Right.
And, when I'm doing a lot of this stuff, I'm 21 years old.
Yeah.
I'm 22, and it's like, that's what everybody was doing,
Yeah.
in the 80s or when you're just that age, when you're in your teens and 20s, you think differently and live differently and act differently than you do when you become an adult in your 30s or 40s or when you become a father, so
Trust me, I can relate.
yeah. So, the stuff we did, I wouldn't, if my son said, "Hey, I'm going to do this, this, and this," I'd be like, dude, maybe chill on that, Of course, that's because I'm the parent,
Yeah.
But no, I don't have any regrets.
Yeah.
And the things that we did, it's not for the faint of heart, so to speak. It's like the dirt.
And it was probably a shitload of fun too.
Absolutely. Big time,
You were always, and you've talked pretty openly about this, you were always labeled as a Bret Michaels clone, which maybe there was a benefit to, wow, you look like Bret Michaels, but did it ever become like, okay, I've had enough of the Bret Michaels comparison?
Yeah, and it got stupid. It's still stupid to this day because I log online and I'll see some people, some haters, some randoms making some comments. Oh my God, the Bret Michaels wannabe is back. And I'm thinking, when was the last time that me and Bret looked similar?
Yeah.
Similar. 1992, three,
Right.
when we were in our 20s or early 30s. Like, I don't understand it.
Yep.
Back in the day, of course, but then there was also people like, yeah, we heard Stevie's getting plastic surgery to look like Brett. I'm like, I am? Maybe it's because we're both, mid from the Midwest, blonde hair, blue eyed, couple years apart, both have, European roots. I guess he's maybe what, German, Czechoslovakian or something, and I'm the same. It's like, yeah, I can't even afford lunch, but no, I'm going to get plastic surgery. Hey, make me look like the singer from Poison. But it's no different than, everybody at some point, somebody gets to be first
Yeah.
and somebody's second. It's like when Vince Neil and Motley Crue came out after Van Halen, even though Motley Crue during their early years didn't look like Van Halen did. Dave's here and here's Vince. Now Vince ascends, we have Motley Crue, and then you have Poison coming up.
Yep.
Now Brett's getting he just wants to be David Lee Roth or Vince Neil. Then Jani comes up. Oh, he just wants to be Bret Michaels or Vince Neil, or David Lee Roth. And little by little, and then I come up. Oh, he just wants to be Jani Lane. He just wants to be Brett. I'm like, listen, when I started doing this, those guys didn't even exist in my world. I didn't even know who they were.
Yeah.
And they weren't famous at the time either. Brett was in Pennsylvania and Jani was in Ohio. I was in Wisconsin. Like, people are basing shit off of hair color and eye color. So, but it's the same thing. People compared Kobe Bryant to Michael Jordan for his entire history.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it goes. If you become the new news anchor at this station or that station, they're going to compare you to the previous news anchor. Good, bad, or indifferent.
We did a video here where we talked about the hottest dudes in rock, and you were on, I think there was 4 people on that video. You were on 3 of their choices. You were my number 2 after Michael Monroe. Sorry. And your looks obviously were a big selling point. I remember getting magazines before the debut album came out, and you guys would be in, and I'd be like, holy shit. Like, look at that guy. Like, obviously it's going to happen. Did your looks ever become an issue? Like the other guys, like, fuck, it's always about Stevie. Did that ever become a problem?
Todd, it did for Todd at some point. Of course, he probably hates the fact that I bring that up, but it was at some point. He was bothered by the fact that I got more attention or more press, or I was getting all these pinups. And you're right. Years before our record was even out, I was getting pinups. We weren't getting just blurbs. We were getting band pinups, or I was getting full page pinups in Hit Parader and Rock Scene and Metalix and Faces and Blast and Powerline and all these magazines. And the photographers all wanted to shoot us, and the magazines wanted to run the photos because obviously it was selling. I was even in the teen magazines. I was in Teen Machine. I was in Zing. These are all for, I was in the same magazines with like Scott Baio and Leif Garrett and even Brad Pitt when he was like a young actor. I was in these magazines with, it was some music artists, but then they were taking pretty boys and the cleaner looking rockers, like Bon Jovi, me, Mark Slaughter. And, at the end of the day, it was, for lack of a better term, money in the bank. We had a fan club. Our P.O. box would get listed in these teen magazines, and we'd go to the post office and just get sacks of mail. It was crazy. All these young fans were drawn to me or to the band. And at the end of the day, that's part of what you want to happen. It's why tickets get sold and records get bought. And there's the frenzy outside the meet and greet at the record store. That's what everybody wants at the end of the day. And with that, I'm part of the group. We were an even group. It's not like I was Bon Jovi signed to a solo deal. So whatever we got, we split it. It's
Yeah.
equal. If we make $1 or $100,000, it's still four ways.
Yeah.
Maybe Todd didn't get the pinup, but he's getting the same amount of money I am. We're
Yeah.
riding in the same tour bus and we're living in the same shitty apartment at some point, you know.
In the last year, I think both you and I, Metal Sludge, and this channel have covered Sebastian Bach. He has a habit of sticking his foot in it. You met him in '89, right when they were getting going,
Yep.
and you saw the stardom, but I think you also saw the ugly side of Sebastian. Do you mind telling that story?
Yeah. So I'd never heard of them. I had heard of Madam X, didn't know that he was singing in that band. I think he was even playing the Strip at some point, maybe in '87 or '88 with Madam X, for a couple of shows. But I remember it was Britt from Blackboard Jungle, who's from New Jersey, and their band was playing around in the Strip. And he told me probably in late '88, he's like, there's this band coming out from New Jersey called Skid Row. He's like, they're going to be great. Singer's awesome. So that was the first time I had heard about them. And then it was early '89 when their record got released, same week as Warrant. And we started seeing Youth Gone Wild on, MTV, and then them in the magazines. But luckily for them, obviously Dave's friendship with John, going back to kids playing basketball and riding BMX bikes, they were on the Bon Jovi, sold out arena tour from day one. So by the time they came to Southern California, they had already started to really make waves. I don't think the other videos were out yet. Maybe 18 and Life was just getting released.
Okay.
But on the off nights, they would play club shows, meaning Skid Row. And they played a place called the Marquee in Anaheim, California, which is an hour away. Me and Michael went down and, 400 seat club. We played there many times. And I went down, we went early, the bus is there, and I just rolled up to the bus, pounded on the door, and I said to like a roadie, I said, hey, can you tell the guys in the band that the guys from Tuff are here? We want to say hey. And 2 minutes later, Sebastian comes out. He's like, dude, what's up, bro? Fucking hey, I love your band. He's like, my girlfriend loves you, And I was like, oh, really? He's like, and then he's telling one of the roadies, he's like, go get Maria, go get Maria. It's like, dude, my girlfriend loves you so much. Oh my God, this is going to be. So then she comes out. I meet Maria. We're all hanging out. And then they're getting ready for the show. So they went in to go play. And I went with Maria, who, of course, then became his wife and the mother of his kids.
Yep.
He had a kid at that point, but nobody had known because I think the label and the management was trying to keep it under wraps. Yeah. But I watched that show with Maria. And the pinups of me in the magazines, or the pictures of me wearing those Skid Row shirts that says Skid Row kicked my fucking ass, Sebastian and Rachel and the guys actually gave me those shirts. So, but that was my first time hanging out with them. Then we went to the video shoot for
Piece of Me,
which was at the Country Club in Reseda. And it was a closed set. There was some fans that they had, a few hundred people that they had for shooting some of the shots. But other than that, I was in like a VIP area with Christina Applegate. It was me, Michael, and Christina Applegate. That was the three people in the VIP area. So we're kind of watching them. And then in between shoots, we were kind of hanging out, me and Sebastian. And he was doing an interview. And there was a photographer there that took a bunch of photos of me and Sebastian together, which I've never seen those photos. And I hope at some point they would become unearthed, because this is '89, so I'm 23, he's 21. Yeah. We're both in our prime of looking like rock gods. I'd love to see what those photos look like,
Oh, man.
Yeah. But so we're there that day, and then there's some other people and a family, like a woman. I think she worked on the set, and she brought her daughter or her niece or something. She's like 12. So she wants to meet Sebastian. The woman brings her up. He's like, oh, she loves you, blah, blah, blah. And the little girl's like, I really think you're awesome. And you should meet my uncle. And he's a singer. He's a vocal teacher. He could help you. Like, he teaches people all the time. And Sebastian's like, your uncle's a singer? And she's like, yeah, like maybe you could learn from him or something. And he lost his mind. He starts screaming at her. Your uncle? Did your uncle play Russia? Is your uncle on tour with Bon Jovi? I play arenas every night. I've got a platinum record. Who the fuck is your uncle? And this little girl's like, well, I just thought maybe, And the woman's like, it's okay, honey, don't worry. And I'm looking at this guy thinking, dude, are you really destroying this little girl because she told you her uncle was a vocal teacher? Like, she's not trying to insult you. Of course, we get it. You're the superstar rock star that's going around the world right now.
Yeah.
But this girl's like in sixth grade. What the fuck is your problem, dude?
Yeah.
Like, and so of course they pull her away, and he's like, "Wow," being Sebastian. And there was two or three other incidents that were similar backstage at a show with them and Pantera. He's always been a loose cannon
Yeah.
that has no control over his emotions and a broken filter. It's like being honest is one thing, being stupid is another. You know, listen, we get it. You're probably a way more accomplished vocalist than this girl's, dumb uncle.
Yeah.
But did you really need to destroy this 10-year-old's dream? It's like, dude, leave it alone. But so that's the early days of Bach,
And we can make a whole separate video about the later days of Bach.
Yeah.
But
But
in
that
1990, you go on tour with Brittany Fox in April, and
Yep.
you play one show, and the tour implodes. Like, will you tell us about that?
I'm still pissed at Dizzy Dean for that because he
Yep.
ruined our vacation. 2 weeks, 10 shows, Boston, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. We're, whole East Coast run. This was our first ever time on the East Coast. Like you said, spring, April 1990. We get into town, drive up to Providence, Rhode Island. We played the living room, had a great show first night, packed. We sold a ton of merch. We're just living a fantasy. We're in a van, they're in a bus with a trailer, and we're sharing their back line. And our drummer got an endorsement to give him his sonar got a kit. So we had some of our own equipment. But then the next day we drove to Boston and we all went to the mall. So we're excited, we're on tour in a mall in Boston, and we come back to the hotel. And also we hear all this noise in the hallway. It sounded like they were playing football or something. And we open up our door and there's like two or three guys on the ground. Dean's fucking screaming and yelling. People are holding him back. Michael Kelly Smith's on the ground holding his arm. The whole band is there. The tour manager, roadies. I thought it was a joke. I thought they were trying to pull something over on us. Like I thought they were trying to, we're freshmen, we're on our first tour with a national band like that. So I thought they were trying to haze us of some sort. So we come out, we're like, what's going on? And then at some point we realized it was serious. There was supposedly a band meeting. Somebody said something Dean didn't like, and he got physical and started attacking people. So then everybody goes back to their rooms. Our manager was there, Brian, and he said, Stevie, you got to do something. You got to talk to Dean. And I guess Dean did like me, and he respected me that I was also straight edge because Dean was very clean. He didn't smoke, drink, do any of that stuff. And he didn't like the fact that the other guys wanted to have some beer or party on the days off or whatever. So they asked me to go in there and try to save the day. So I'm in the dress in Dean's hotel room as he's folding up his clothes. Gene and Paul wouldn't stand for this crap. That's why they got rid of Ace and Peter. And, he's preaching to me about whatever Kiss did. And I'm like, Dean, you can't leave. We just got here. Dude, like we spent all this money. We made shirts. It's our first East Coast tour. He didn't care. Within a few hours, he left, got in a taxi or whatever, went to some train station and back to Philly. And then I guess they talked to the clubs. Most of the clubs were like, well, if Brittany Fox isn't coming, we're just going to blow the date out. So 36 hours later, we were back in Los Angeles. Our 2-week tour was one show. We lost thousands of dollars and flew back.
What?
Embarrassed. And
Yeah.
of course, then we didn't go out for 2 weeks either. Like, we can't go out. Everyone's like, I thought you were going on tour. You must have lied about it. It's like, no, we didn't lie. We actually went. It just imploded. So yeah, 2 weeks we stayed in the Tough Muff Mansion apartment and didn't go out.
And you don't have to share this, but have you talked to him in, I mean, the guy has disappeared off the face of the planet.
I haven't talked to him in the last 15 years, but since then, yeah. As a matter of fact, I saw him a few times when he was doing the Black Eyed Susan stuff. I think we did a photo shoot with Anna Maria DeSanto, and the same day it was like she was shooting Black Eyed Susan and then Tuff, or vice versa. So we ended up crossing paths. And over the years, even I think since Metal Sludge, I did talk to Dean on the phone a couple times when was Jared Dean and he went country. And Dean's a talented guy. Dean's a smart guy, very hardworking guy, but at the same time, he's a little delusional, and he got lucky and, not all luck, but, he reinvented himself. And even with the Black Eyed Susan deal, I think he got a lot of money, big advances, publishing, the whole deal. And then within a year or so, 2 years, that blows up. Then he's doing country. And he's one of those guys that he's all in on something. And then when he's not, it's garbage. Doesn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Never again. Throw it away. Now this thing, I'm all this. Even down to the name change, At some point, as Johnny D and others, I'm not Dizzy Dean. I'm Jared Dean. He didn't want to be Dizzy anymore. Dizzy was a cool stage name in the mid 80s. Like, Blackie and Nicky and Laser and Ricky and all these kind of cool. That was a cool name to have, Dizzy Dean. But then he realized how goofy it sounded at some point, so he no longer wanted to be that. Then he went and, he was just Dean Davidson. Then he was Jared Dean, and I don't know. I think there was another stage name at some point. He tried to reinvent himself a few different ways.
Right. So you get signed in 90, you go record What Comes Around Goes Around with Howard Benson.
Yep.
And I appreciate all your time. I feel like but I love this. So
all good.
Tell me about recording that album. I mean, was it a difficult process, or were you like, fucking hey, this is awesome?
Awesome. Awesome from the word go. We get signed in the spring of 90. We do our signing show in the summer. Hell just froze over. Atlantic Titanium recording artist Tuff. Then we go into pre-production in the fall, which is like October. We meet a couple of producers. We end up picking Howard Benson. We're in pre-production for a few weeks. And then they decide we're going to start recording December 26th, the day after Christmas. So the first week we were at Track Records in North Hollywood, and they did all the basic drums and bass with Michael and Todd. And then the New Year's came, and after, I don't know, January 2nd or 3rd, we're in a studio. I forget what it's called. This is one that keeps escaping me, but it was in Woodland Hills, not far from where I live. We did all the overdubs in most of January. By the end of January, the record was close to being done, because in February, they started mastering, and we did our first show in Denver, Colorado, like early February of 91. Great time. Loved being in the studio.
So the album gets done, and you can buy the remastered version on metalsludge.tv. So here's the vinyl. And I'll show you this. Maybe you've seen this before, but I have this hanging in my house. I'm gonna have to back this up.
Ah, you got one of those, huh?
The 34 by 26, yeah. But you start to shoot a video for the all new generation, probably the song that most people, and I know you've told this before on
Yep.
the diaries, probably the song that most people would think was going to be the first single.
Yep.
And it gets switched to I Hate Kissing You Goodbye. Like, what happens to cause that change?
Well, that poster you're holding up, at some point, they're talking about making a poster. And then we get some type of incoming. This is obviously before the internet saw it, and it must have been a FedEx or something. They said, this is the photo, this is what the poster is going to look like. We didn't like that photo. That's actually like an even oh, I think that photo is from like early 90, maybe
Okay.
late 89, early 90. And we're like, we don't like that photo. Like we submitted like 20 other photos, and they're like, they found that one somewhere and picked it, and we were like, we don't want that. And at some point, I remember our manager saying something like, Atlantic said, if you want the poster, this is the poster. You want a poster or not? So we're like, yeah, okay, we'll take a poster. Um, I've told those stories before, and I've seen other interviews, including I think I watched your interview with the guy from McQueen Street. When you're at our level, you don't get to tell the record company what they're going to do. You
Yeah.
just don't get to do it.
Yeah.
And I see people in the peanut gallery making comments with, "Well, I would have told him, fuck you then." It's like, yeah, okay, we're just going to tell you guys, hey, thanks for getting ready to spend a couple of $100,000 on us, but if we don't get to make all the decisions, then go fuck yourself. No, we're a bunch of young 20 somethings. We've never done this before. Clearly, the people at Atlantic Records have done it with a few other bands that had success, like AC/DC and Phil Collins and Genesis and Led Zeppelin, and
Yeah.
the list goes on.
Yeah.
They probably know better than us.
Yeah.
But so then we're going to shoot the video for the first single, All New Generation. That's what we planned. We go to do these live shows. I think it's in May of 91 in Phoenix, Compadre Stadium. It's a 3-day festival. The day we're playing is like Great White, Bang Tango, Tuff, South Gang, Eyes with Jeff Scott Soto. Um, and they send a full camera crew. So big stage, outdoor, festival style, stacks, just killer setup. And they're shooting us all day. And this was going to be the live footage for our All New Generation video. Then we get back to LA a week or 10 days later, and there was going to be a sound stage, which we were going to do the other part of it.
Right.
Well, in the interim, our song "I Ain't Kissing You Goodbye" started getting played on some big radio stations in Chicago, The Blaze, Boston, Baltimore, Salt Lake, and it was getting great phones. This is also at the time when Silent Lucidity was blowing up. More Than Words is blowing up. To Be With You by Mr. Big is blowing up.
Yep.
Obviously, following on the steps of the Every Rose, Something to Believe in, Heaven, I Remember You. Ballads are a big deal, especially for those bands. And of course, it's best if it's the third video or the fourth or even the second. But they came up with this idea that the song was hot. It was starting to track and chart. And they said, we're switching the video. We're doing this instead.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh my God, our first video is going to be a ballad,
Yeah.
But again, what are we going to tell them? No, we're not doing that,
Yeah.
So at some point they change it. The video gets done, gets edited. They send it to MTV. And I believe the video A&R CEO head cheese that makes the decision, I think it was Abby Konovich, said, this is an amazing video. We're putting it on. And not only are we putting it on, we're putting it on in active rotation immediately starting Monday at 3:06 p.m. prime time. Our first ever spin was the follow-up video after Metallica's Enter Sandman world premiere. So how many people are watching MTV to watch Metallica's Enter Sandman world premiere at 3:00 that day?
Yeah.
Tens of millions, probably.
Yeah.
And the very next video is us. So we were at that point given an ace card. We're playing in Vegas now. We're on the big leagues, and they're starting to give us some real love. I mean, and then it got played 6 hours later, and then 12 hours later, and the next day. Next thing you know, we're getting 2 or 3 spins a day during prime time.
Yep. Where
Where most bands that come out like us get the Headbangers Ball spin at 2:47 a.m.
Yeah.
between Spread Eagle and Overkill. And now we're getting our video next to Metallica and
Yeah.
all the biggest bands. So very thankful.
Yeah. And it goes to number 3 on MTV, and the story's been told a million times, right around the same time Nirvana comes out with Smells Like Teen Spirit. I mean, when that starts happening, at what point are you like, wait a minute, something's happening? Like, when do you notice?
we all saw that they were blowing up, all of those bands, Pearl Jam, but I don't think any of us thought. I don't remember who said it. Somebody you interviewed recently said something like, "Hey, this has been going on forever. There's room for everybody."
Yeah.
I mean, throughout the history of MTV, and here's where some of these fans don't understand just how massive MTV is or how big of a deal it is when you get played on there or if you get played on the radio. When you get played on a radio station, for starters, usually they're done by format. You got rock radio, you got R&B, you got hip hop, you got easy listening, soft listening, oldies. So you're not going to hear a rap song on K Rock
Right.
in Los Angeles. K Rock is playing, more alternative and new wave. KLOS is playing more rock, Van Halen, Black Sabbath, Ozzy. You're not going to hear Ice Cube or Dr. Dre or Snoop Dogg, no matter how big they are, you're not going to hear them on those stations.
Right.
But you're going to hear them on Power 106, or one of those other stations. My point is, when you get to MTV, you got Michael Jackson, you got Metallica, you got Wham, you got Devo, you got Poison, you got Motley Crue, you got Madonna, Cyndi Lauper, Slaughter. I mean, it's across the board. Lenny Kravitz, every style all mixed in. So when Nirvana comes out and starts exploding, we're like, wow, this Seattle band is really exploding. Well, at the same time, we still have Metallica, we still have Warrant, we have Skid Row, we also have Alice in Chains, or we have a Van Halen record with Sammy Hagar. So again, it's all a mishmash. They could have still continued to play some Poison stuff or some Winger or Tuff, but at some point, the movement was so big. It was so just massive. I mean, the '80s are here, and the '90s. It's like just a slide happened. Like everything that was over here is just wash it away.
Yeah.
And now you got Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Typo Negative, you know, obviously Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Nine Inch Nails. It was just a completely different world. And everything that was happening with the bands that were related to the quote unquote 80s glam rock, hair band, hair metal, and of course we know that those terms trigger some people. I personally think they're fine terms. There's nothing wrong with it. It pretty much describes what those bands were. White Snake. But when it went away, it was very severe and complete. And what I mean by that is when I called the book The Troubadour, I said, hey, I want to put together a Tuff show. This is like 93 or 94. And they're like, yeah, I don't know if we're going to put that show on. I'm like, well, what do you mean? The last time we played there, we had 400 people in there. I literally begged the club to let me play a show there. And they lowballed me. We still made a bonus. We still pulled in a good crowd. But it was not even whether or not, like, having 300 people there didn't even matter. They're like, well, we don't want to book Tuff. We don't want to have a hair band. We want to go more singer-songwriter or more alternative or more thrash, Just it was no longer okay. And I talked to magazines. They didn't want to put us in the magazines. Even road crew guys, nah, I'd rather not work with that. I don't want to do that tour.
Yeah.
They didn't want to be involved, So if you were, and Tuff at some point was, the epitome of what Van Halen, Motley, and Poison and Skid Row was in the 80s. Were we still looking like that in 93, 94? No, of course not.
Right.
There was no more cowboy boots. There was no more shiny pants or bright purple headbands. No, we lost a lot of that.
Yeah.
We didn't grow, a Duck Dynasty beard, but we lost some of the gloss. But it still wasn't good enough. You're already forever tattooed and labeled Tuff, Warrant, Slaughter, whatever. It don't matter. And even a band like Skid Row, who was on the heavier side, Sebastian had that amazing voice. Even by their third record, and as dark as it was, the industry was not buying it. They went from selling 5 million to 2 million to barely going gold. There's a difference, 10 times the amount of records came out, they sold in 89 or
Yeah.
90 compared to what they sold in 94 and 95. And that's simply because the whole industry was like, nah, we're not going to put Sebastian on the cover.
Yeah.
We're going to put Eddie Vedder on the cover.
And even Slave to the Grind, even though it debuted at #1, none of those songs were like big hits,
No,
you know.
no.
Um, what did you do for touring on What Comes Around Goes Around? Like, who did you go out with?
Well, we did a bunch of club dates on our own and a bunch of one-offs with everybody. You know,
Okay.
we played a show with Don Dokken.
Yeah.
We played a show with Aldo Nova.
Yeah.
We played a show with Saigon Kick. We played a show with Soraya, you know. A lot of one-offs with random bands, you know, Dangerous Toys, Enough's Enough. We did one tour with Lita Ford, which was like supposed to be 6 weeks, but then she got sick and left after about 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
All of the dates were club dates. Maybe there was a theater or two in there, and maybe a couple of festivals where we were, you know, billed with other bands, like the Great White, Bang Tango,
Yeah.
LA Guns kind of thing. But for the most part, it was all clubs, and it was all through the entire year from start to finish. And at the end of the year in December is when we were on our way home after the Lita Ford tour was ending. She had already left, but we did the last couple of weeks on our own. And that's when Chase decided he was going to quit the band soon after that, at the end of 91.
And before Chase left, like, did you have your truck stolen on tour?
Yeah,
On
we had
tour?
one other thing we did in 91 is we went to England. We did the American Dream week in London, England, where we played the world famous Astoria Theater, like a 1,500, 2,000 seat theater. We headlined that, packed it, did, you know, press. We're on MTV in England and in Kerrang and did all that. And we got back from England, flew to Florida, and then we started doing the rest of our dates. And we're on tour. We played Memphis, Tennessee in like mid-October of 91. And it was a Saturday, and we had Sunday off. So we were all going to go to Graceland to see where Elvis is buried, you know? And then a couple days later, the tour picked up in Texas. So we all went to bed after our show in Memphis. And then at 3 or 4 in the morning, we got a knock on our door. It was a couple of our roadies, and they said, "Do you guys have the truck? Where did you park the truck?" And we're like, "We don't have the truck." And a couple of our guys went to like Denny's to eat, and they came back and they were looking for the truck because they wanted to get something out and they couldn't find it. So they started asking everybody, and nobody knew where the truck was. And so, yeah, our truck got stolen. And then the next day, the police called us and told us they found it burning in a field. They took what they could, guitars and some other stuff. And then they pulled the gas cap and they torched it. And so they burned. Most of our gear was still in the truck, but 95% of it was torched and lost. Michael did get some cymbals. He found a cymbal case, which he opened up because they were metal, saved the cymbals, and a couple pieces of hardware, like some cymbal stands.
Yeah.
But 95% of all of our gear, Ampeg stacks, Marshall stacks, cases with hot rodded, you know, Marshall amps, guitars, basses, acoustics, merchandise, all kinds of stuff that we had got on the road from a couple of months, including stuff from England. Just everything gone, which was brutal.
I mean, that's got to be how much money would
80
that?
grand, probably. I mean, in today's money, it'd probably be a couple $100,000.
Yeah. You mentioned Todd leaving at the end, and if I understand right, did that start when there was talk about doing a second video for So Many Seasons?
Correct.
Is that when kind of the Todd disagreement started happening?
Well, Todd and me had already had a little, you know, a couple of dust ups over the years. You know, it's kind of a fire and ice thing. You know, I've been better friends with Todd in the last 15 years than I was with him in the previous 15 years.
Yeah.
And I think some of that he came to realize was just him being stubborn.
Yeah.
But at some point, you know, Todd was the main songwriter in the band.
Yeah.
And him and George would orchestrate and put together, write most of the music. And I was like somebody that would write the lyrics and melodies. Then at some point when I said, hey, I got a couple ideas, why don't we check these out? They weren't thrilled, especially Todd was not thrilled, I don't think, about me contributing music because it was kind of stepping on him.
Sure.
And, you know, one of the ideas was Kissing You Goodbye. And then, of course, that becomes a single, which Todd was not thrilled, I guess, as we all weren't. Like, hey, we don't want a ballad to be first. Like, we're a rock band, you know. Let's show them some, you know, all new generation, you know, then maybe So Many Seasons or Ruckapit Bridge, and then the ballad. But so then, because it was my song, you know, of course, I get a little shine. Oh, that's a song Stevie wrote. Then they were going to do another video, and it was going to be for So Many Seasons. And when Todd found out, he was furious. He was just pissed. He's like, another one of Stevie's songs, and of course, I wasn't making that decision. The label was. They were like, this sounds like it could be the most commercially viable song. And so then they put together a treatment, and it's like Stevie's in a field. Stevie's playing guitars. Leaves are falling. George is doing the guitar solo while Stevie walks by a stream, you know, and explaining what's going to happen in the video. And Todd again was just like, why is this all about Stevie? Isn't it a band? Aren't we a band? We're like, dude, we are a band. Like, what are you talking about? And we threw all the stuff at him. Like, when you watch a Van Halen thing, do you see more of Dave and Eddie, or do you see more of Michael Anthony?
Right.
It's just, you know, do you see more Rob Affuso in the Skid Row videos or Scotty Hill, or do you see Sebastian and Snake? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
So, and again, he's in his 20s. He's young. He's being stupid. You know, he's being petty and jealous and dumb. But again, at the end of the day, and I was a smart ass. So of course, you know, when he's bitching about, like, of course it's all about me. Duh, hello, you know, I'm being funny. I'm trying to joke about it, but
Right.
it's like, it's not like I had some secret, you know, phone I could call Jason Flom, Atlantic Records. Yeah, please pick my song next. Even if you want Todd's, pick mine. You know, it never happened. You know, they decided what they thought was most viable, commercially acceptable, or what was going to maybe give us a shot. And because that was a choice, that was another thing that pissed him off.
So the label, you obviously you didn't do the video for So Many Seasons. You guys did an independent one.
Correct.
Were you still on Atlantic when you recorded that? When you made that video?
I think so. So what happened is the original version of All New Generation, all that live footage, that never got edited and never got used. And then we did the I Kissing Goodbye video, which is on the stage set at Burbank. After 6 months or 8 months, or maybe it was even a year later, I somehow connected with Cindy Kiefer from the production company, and she gave me all of that raw footage that they shot from that stadium show in Arizona.
Yep.
So it was actually my friend Sean, who I had done Metal Sludge with.
Yep.
He was video editing as a kid and started learning it. So him and I sat with his editing board and edited that video together for All New Generation.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was footage that was shot by and paid for by Atlantic, but it was never finished. Then we got it after the fact and edited together to make that video that appears on YouTube.
Right. Todd leaves at the end of 91, but you're still on Atlantic.
Yep.
When you are done with What Comes Around Goes Around, the touring is done, and maybe Todd's out of the band, maybe Todd's still in the band at that point. But do you feel like, hey, we're still on solid ground, like we're good to go going into the second album? Or are you like, uh-oh?
No, there was no As a matter of fact, our manager put some pressure on the label and said, hey, these guys are going to make another record. Atlantic wanted us to make another record. And they said, okay, we'll give you $5,000 for demos, which in today's money is like 10 grand. They also put us on salary. They guaranteed us 6 months at $6,000 a month.
Okay.
So that's 36 grand plus so they basically committed to another 40, $50,000, for the first part of 92. So
Okay.
we took the 5 grand. Todd's now gone. I wrote the majority of what's on Fist First. God Bless This Mess, In Dogs We Trust, Better Off Dead, Simon Says. Those are all songs that I wrote. Rattle My Bones and Electric Church, those were written by Michael Raphael from Jailhouse with Michael Lean. George had contributed riffs a little bit, but he wasn't really a songwriter and didn't ever spend the time to put things together. So now that Todd was gone, there was a little bit more pressure on me, and I ended up writing, like I said, most of that second record.
Yep.
Atlantic gave us the money. We went and demoed 9 songs at Cornerstone Studios in Chatsworth, California, very close to where I'm from. And as a matter of fact, I think Motley Crue did their Dr. Feelgood demos there.
Okay.
And I think Vince Neil did his second record there. So we recorded 9 songs, finished 6. This is in the spring of 92. We're getting $6,000 a month salary from Atlantic,
Yep.
which me and Michael and George each took $1,500, and then we put $1,500 in a band account so we could pay for like rehearsals and different stuff like that.
Yep.
And at this point, we're also looking for bass players and auditioning them, but we were kind of taking our time. We got a ton of people interested, and Robbie Crane was a very dear friend of ours forever and played in local bands and even worked for us. So we said, Crane, why don't you play for now? And he agreed to do it. So Robbie Crane did all the bass tracks on most of what you hear on Fist First and Religious Fix. That's Robbie Crane. So he's rehearsing with us. And we also auditioned Danny Wilder, who was in Paradise, that was playing locally. The bass player from Cacophony was interested, believe it or not. Who obviously that band was famous because of Jason Becker and Marty Friedman.
Right.
And we got 100 packages. We probably, auditioned 10 guys,
Yeah.
but we really were going to give it to Robbie Crane.
Yeah.
Crane was going to be the bass player. And then literally at that same time, Robbie gets invited to play with Vince Neil. And literally he shoots a video with him. And then 2 weeks later, Vince is like, you want to be in my band? So of course, Robbie takes that gig, even though he was hired to be the rhythm guitar player because Phil Sassoon was playing bass.
Yeah.
So when Robbie takes the Vince Neil gig, we're like, okay, we got to pick somebody. It's going to be Danny. So it was Danny Wilder from Paradise. He becomes the bass player. And we're still doing all the business for the band and keeping the money to ourselves. That's another reason we're like, well, we don't want another guy yet, because then we have to give him something. Like, we'll just keep all the money for us.
Yeah.
Then we go have a meeting with Jason Flom and Kevin Williamson, and our manager told us, I can't be there for that because he was on the East Coast. He's like, don't have the meeting, wait for me. We're like, no, we want to play him our songs. And this was right during when the riots happened after Rodney King's trial ended with the police being freed and let go, found not guilty.
Yeah.
And the city was rioting and burning everything down.
Yeah.
That's when we were recording our demos. So we go to meet Jason Flom and Kevin Williamson at the Atlantic Records offices on Sunset Boulevard, April 8th? May 13th. We recorded in April. We go meet them May 13th. And our manager told us, don't do it. No, we want to do it. We go meet them. So we go play them the tape. They play the first few bars of God Bless This Mess, and Jason motions to Kevin to stop the tape player. Sounds heavier. You guys are getting heavier, huh? And of course, I'm like, yeah, we're totally going heavy. Like, we love Metallica and Slave to the Grind is awesome. And Jason Flom looks at me and goes, the first Skid Row album sold 5 million copies because of their ballads. This last one is nowhere near that. We're like, yeah, but we want to be heavy. And he's like, well, I hear you guys being more of a pop band. You should really do this. And nah, we don't want to do that, So he's giving me all kinds of outs, and I'm putting my foot in my mouth. Long story short, we leave that meeting. The next day, our manager calls us on May 14th of 1992 and says, you're dropped.
Yeah.
Atlantic is dropping you. We're like, huh? You know what May 14th is, right?
I don't.
It's the 1 year anniversary of the release of What Comes Around Goes Around.
That's right. Shit.
So we got dropped 1 year to the day after our album came out.
Yeah.
And our manager then tells us, you fucked up. At this point, we're still on salary.
Yeah.
They're giving us $6,000 a month.
Yeah.
Jason even said, I want you to work with, I think his name is David Prater. He goes, you should work with David Prater. I go, I don't know who that is. He goes, he produced Firehouse.
Right.
Nah, we don't want to sound like Firehouse. Meanwhile, they're platinum, you know? So the proper thing for me to say would have been, I'd love to work with David Prater. Where does he live? Let's write some songs with him. That'd be great. And Jason might have went, David's open. I just talked to him. That's why let me hook you two up, you know? And then our manager could have said, hey, well, they're going to work with him for the next 4 months. Why don't you put him on salary for another 4 months? You know, give him another 10 grand so they can do those demos with David Prater, you know, but it is what it is. You know, all things are meant to be in one way or the other. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and you learn from your mistakes. And there's definitely some things that I could say without a doubt I did along the way that helped this band. And I probably did some things along the way that hurt this band. So my big mouth probably got us dropped. So.
Is there any talk between you and George and Michael about maybe that's it, man? Or is it like, are all three of you, nope, we're still going straight ahead?
I was not deterred in the least. I'm like, okay, fuck them, next, you know. I think George thought the same. Michael probably being smarter and a little bit more aware and a little bit more of a thinker.
Yeah.
He probably was. He was probably like, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is not good, you know? Yeah. But I'm like, we'll get another record deal. We'll make something happen. And at this point, it's early. It's the spring of 92.
Right.
Nirvana's record's only been out for 6 or 8 months, 8 months, 10 months. I mean, it was big. Things were happening, but nobody, and I don't care. I've seen all the interviews. Oh, I knew it was over. No, they didn't. Nobody knew it was over. Right. Yes, the ticket sales were dwindling. Yes, there was more pinups of Pearl Jam and Typo Negative and Stone Temple Pilots and less of Winger and Warrant and Slaughter, but nobody really thought that it was going to nosedive the way it did. I mean, Motley Crue changes their singer, goes to Tucson, goes to a radio station. Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx and John Corabi are on the radio and says, everybody that comes down here today, we'll give you free tickets for tonight. And there's an interview where Nikki and Tommy talk about it. 2 people came. Yeah. 2 people came. They're playing, you know, arenas with, you know, 1,200 or 1,500 people there. This is Motley Crue. Yeah. 3 years earlier, they would have sold that arena out 2 nights in a row, 15,000 plus, you know? So it did change, and it was not immediately swift, but over the course of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it just went like this, you know? Just continually down. And here's another thing. During that Atlantic meeting, we're sitting in the meeting. Jason's talking to us, and at some point he goes, I want to play you something. This is a new band where we signed. And he told us the name, Stone Temple Pilots. And they put in the tape and played a little bit, listened to it, and we got in the elevator, and I literally said, Stone Pimple Pigeons. I literally said that. Stone Pimple Pigeons, and laughed. Right. Well, that debut record sold like 7 million copies. Yeah. So I didn't say that to Jason Flom, but I said it in the elevator when we left. Little did I know that in less than 24 hours, we were going to no longer be on the label.
Yeah. In October of 93, Michael leaves. How does that, he's the leader of the band.
Yeah. Well, and at that point, Michael was without a doubt the final say, but I think within probably about a year of me being in the band, that me and Michael were like this. We were Gene and Paul, you know? Yeah. And I think Michael saw at some point, maybe not in the first year, but within a couple of years, I was ready to also make qualified decisions for us and help lead.
Yep.
So Michael also, I think, could rely on me at some points to go, you do this, I'll do that. But yeah, as it was coming up, it's in '93, the end of the summer, the fall is here. We're getting ready to go on the tour. We had like a 6-week tour booked. And I remember telling Michael, it's like, dude, 2 weeks, we're leaving. We got to rehearse. And he kept blowing me off. And then it was 10 or 11 days out. I said, Michael, we need to rehearse. And we're on the phone and he just said, I don't know if I can do that tour. Why don't you get Billy to do it? Which was my roommate who was a drummer. And I was like, huh? Get Billy to do it? Are you kidding me? We're leaving in like 10 days. And he's just like, I don't think I'm going to do it. And he's like, why don't you get Billy to do it? And, he can do the tour, but I'll stay in the band. And I said, dude, you're either in the band or you're not in the band. And at that point, he just said, dude, I'm not in the band then. I can't do it. And looking back, this is '93. Michael's son is 6 years old.
Yeah.
He's getting ready to start kindergarten.
Yeah.
It's the fall. Michael's like thinking, I can't leave for 2 months.
Yeah.
And
right.
At this point, him and his baby mama had been split. He had a girlfriend, but he couldn't. And Michael had custody of the son.
Yeah.
So Michael was like probably thinking, I can't tell her like, hey, take care of my kid for 6 weeks while I'm on tour in a van playing in front of 130 people in Iowa.
Yeah.
So Michael left. I was not happy, but I wasn't furious. It wasn't a big fuck off moment.
Right.
I just realized that he saw the writing on the wall and he had been talking about wanting to start a business. So I called my buddy and ended up getting this guy from Detroit, Jimmy, who had played with us. His band opened for us in Detroit at Harpo's a couple of years earlier. And he was a great drummer. He looked cool. He was a little younger, flashy. I called him up. I said, are you interested? He said, yes. Day or two later, he flew to LA, learned the songs. We rehearsed 2 or 3 days. And within 10 days, he was on his first national tour for like a month and a half straight and killed it. Yeah.
Right. In '94, you're like, screw it. We got these Atlantic demos. So you start a record label. Record label Suck Records. Put out Fist First. Here's the remastered vinyl version that you just put out last year. Like,
yeah.
Like how do you, how the hell do you know how to start a record label?
Well, going back to '93, so at one point we did sign a second deal. We signed to IRS Grand Slam. Grand Slam Records was run by a guy named, the president was Brian McAvoy. They had put out, I think, White Lion's first record. Mm-hmm. They put out a record by Cry Wolf, a few other bands. Mm-hmm. But Grand Slam signed us. So they came to us. They knew we were dropped from Atlantic. They knew we had these demos. We sent the demos. Brian liked it. So we came up with an idea. And at some point they signed us. And they basically paid us for the demos. The demos were already paid for by Atlantic. So we when they dropped us, they just let us go. And we never asked. We just took our tapes and went.
Okay.
We sell the tapes, or we license the tapes to Brian McAvoy for $7,500. That's all we could get. Yeah. But he gives us $7,500. That's profit in our pocket. Also in the contract, I don't remember if this was my idea, but it was implemented in the contract that once we sign this deal, matter of fact, I think it was part of my idea. I said, we can't wait a long time. This has to come out now. It's already 1993. It's like 2 years since our record came out. And we're ready to go. There's a full record here. So I said, we need to put a time limit. In other words, if we sign this today on July 1st of 1993, it's got to come out within 6 months. If it doesn't, you breach contract and we get the masters back. So we signed the deal. They give us the money. We give them the masters. And then in the fall of '93, I had that tour booked. Brian McAvoy calls me and says, do not go on that tour. I don't want you to tour. Wait till the record comes out. I said, I'm not waiting. He was pissed at me. And I sent him this long letter. I said, I'm not going to wait. I don't trust anybody. We have all these dates. We need to make money. We want to keep selling our brand. We'll do another tour next year when the record comes out. Well, he wasn't happy. Needless to say, in so many words, I told him to go fuck himself. We're going on the tour. And we did. We did all the dates. Now the end of '93 comes. It's early '94. And then at some point I get the phone call in the early spring. Brian Brian Kushner, our manager, says Brian McAvoy just took a job at Polygram as an A&R guy. IRS is going under. Grand Slam lost its distribution. Your record's not coming out. And my immediate reaction was, ha, motherfucker, I told you. That's why I didn't wait. So
Right.
now we did the tour. Now the masters resort back to us again. So basically you paid us $7,500 to hold the tapes for 6 months. Now, and that's just meaning, you know, copies of them. So now in the spring, it's April, Kurt Cobain gets killed or kills himself. My grandfather dies that same week. I fly home from my grandpa's funeral, and on the radio, I heard that day Nirvana singer dead from suicide in Seattle. It's like April, what, 4th,
Yep.
94?
Yep.
And at that point, my grandpa just died, Kurt Cobain killed himself, and we just lost our second record deal in 2 years. So I was like, screw this. I'm not waiting for anybody. We're going to do it all on our own. I'm starting my own label. And I literally, off the cuff of my brain, I just said, record labels suck. And that's going to be the name of my label. RLS, Record Labels Suck Records. Here I am. Then I came up with an alternative meaning, which is Rachelle's lyrics and songs. And I wrote most of that record anyway. So
Right.
I immediately enlisted my cousin Keith Cartwright. Said, Keith, we need to find a place to make CDs, cassettes, replication, mastering, graphics, the whole works. So we get Music Connection, we start making calls, and all of that started the first week of April. And by June, I went to a CD manufacturing plant, and they brought out a forklift pallet of finished product, which is a picture that exists in one of my Tuff tour diaries. So all of the shenanigans that takes a label 6 months or a year, we did it in 8 weeks. Had the CDs, had the cassettes, ads were placed in Metal Edge, Hit Parader, Faces Magazine, order this, P.O. Box, send a check, money order, shirt, CD, cassette, panties. Money started turning over. Started doing tour dates again. And at that point, started selling enough records, had to reprint the CDs again, had to reprint the cassettes again. Now, a couple record labels start calling me. They want to pick it up. Mausoleum MMS, which is a label based out of Europe, I think Holland or Amsterdam, they contact me and they want to take over the record and basically sell it, distribute it. And they made me an offer of $3,000. Or no, $2,500.
Yeah.
They offered me $2,500 to license the record and take it over. And the guy's name was Steve Shipp. And I said, Steve, why would I give you my record to sell in you know, from here till eternity, chasing my royalty on the back end? Why would I give you that for $2,500? He goes, well, why wouldn't you? And I said, well, I sold 400 copies to a distributor 2 weeks ago at $6 a piece for $2,400. I sold him 400 copies for $2,400. I still have the rights and I'm continuing to sell. You're going to offer me $100 more than that so you can sell it as much as you want forever? And I'll chase the back end? That's never going to happen. And so he's like, well, we can do this. We can put you in magazines. We'll make a poster. And I literally said, do you know who Ice Cube is? And he said, yeah. And I go, I heard an interview recently where he said, fuck you, I'm getting paid. And I said, those are my words to you. Fuck you, I'm getting paid. I don't want your $100. And so literally happened. So we went back and forth and he says, what do you want? We can help you move this record. So I said, I want $30,000 and I want 5,000 pieces of the product when you manufacture and print the new piece, which he said he also wanted to retitle and we'd add a couple songs to it to give it a little bit of a difference from Fist First.
Yep.
And they said, no way in hell. My manager told me I was crazy, but I said, I want 30 grand. I want 5,000 pieces of product. Those 5,000 pieces I could sell for $10, and over time I will sell them. That's 50 grand. So really I'd make 80 grand off this, which is more than the $75,000 that Atlantic Titanium gave us.
Yeah.
But all wishful thinking. But in the end, I'm at 30. They offered 5. I said no. They offered 75. I said no. They offered 9. I said no. I said, I'll take 25. They said no. Then they said 12. I said no. In the end, they agreed to $15,000 and 3,000 pieces of product. The 3,000 pieces of product over time made me 30 grand, plus the 15 is 45. And we originally got 7,500 from IRS Grand Slam, and they never used it. So that's 52.5. And Atlantic paid for the demos, 5,000. So in the end, Fist First has been bought and sold and resold, I don't know, like a half a dozen times. And in the end, it's all equated to some type of money in my pocket or the band's pocket. And so by 1994, Fist First was record number 1 from RLS Records.
And I did a review of the vinyl.
Yeah.
And I said that my favorite song on Fist First was Better Off Dead.
Right.
Were you concerned about writing a song that was that dark and that, I hate to say it, grungy sounding?
Well, going back to the meeting on May 13th, 92 with Jason Flom and the Atlantic Records offices, after God Bless This Mess, they went to the next song, which was Better Off Dead. Played through the first half of it, and he stopped the tape, and Jason Flom looked at me and said, so what are we going to do when we're dealing with lawsuits from kids killing themselves across America because they think it's better to be dead? I said, well, yeah, it's not going to happen. And of course, I don't know, maybe there's a mention of Judas Priest or Ozzy, and their lawsuits that they dealt with, the suicide solution thing. But a lot of people that heard that song, and I thought, if Alice Cooper released this, might have worked.
Right.
Also at this point, it's yeah, Better Off Dead is a lot darker than So Many Seasons or I Kissing Goodbye, but it was starting to fit with the time. We had Typo Negative, everything was darker, a little eerier, a little bit sadder, a little bit more depressive. So the fact that I'm singing, You Never Cared, I'm Better Off Dead, I'm So Alone, 6 Feet Underground, blah, blah, blah. A lot of that, Ozzy, the No More Tears, some of that, it's some of that darker stuff that was happening with rock. I thought it would have fit. But at the end of the day, yeah, that record is vastly different from the first one.
Yep.
It's definitely darker, a little heavier, but it also was, I think, working for and fitting with the time frame of what was happening in the music world, especially, 92, 93, 94.
Yep. Speaking of 94, I just interviewed Bobby Brown of Cherry Pie fame. We talked about her marriage to Jani Lane. We talked about her relationship with Tommy Lee ending when they broke up and he goes off to marry Pam. And I've heard rumors that maybe you and Bobby Brown had a thing. Do you care to address that or no?
We did. And Bobby is an absolute sweetheart. I love her to death to this very day. We're still friends. And, I had met Bobby when she was with Janie and seen her in clubs. And then at some point, a girlfriend that I had been dating from Texas named Annie became really good friends with Bobby.
Mhm.
And so she was hanging out with Bobby and Charisse and that whole clique, all those girls. They were all friends. So Bobby knew me, obviously, from my band. Then at some point, her and Janie fall out of favor. She starts dating Tommy. And I remember at some point, I was at Annie's apartment, and me and Annie at this point were broken up, but we were still friends. And Bobby was there, and Bobby's asking me, she's talking to me about Tommy, and there was some issues. And I guess he was in Las Vegas. And she's like, he's in Las Vegas with all his friends. Do you think he's cheating on me? And I just started laughing. And I was like, he's in Motley Crue, right? And I'm like, and he's with all his friends and they're in Vegas. They're probably not crocheting like hook rug or anything like that, So, and Bobby's very, she's very funny, very sarcastic and a ball buster. And so was I. So, of course, she's kind of laughing and probably thought I was cute and funny. But then at some point, her and Tommy start going sideways. And I guess when it really hit the fan, at some point it was my ex, Annie, who was like seeing that Bobby was bummed out, sad, depressed, suffering, whatever. And she's like, "Why don't you go hang out with Stevie? Go on a date with Stevie." And she's like, "I'm not going out with Stevie. He's your ex." But at this point, me and Annie had already been broken up for a couple years, like 2 or 3 years. Um, but it was my ex-girlfriend that kind of pushed Bobby to hang out with me. And Bobby was like, I guess, needing some attention for whatever it's worth. We go out to eat a couple times. There was one night she invited me to her house. She's like, "Can you come over here and help me hang some curtains?" And I was like, okay. I've never hung curtains, but Bobby Brown's inviting me to her place, so I go. And she's like, "Hey, can you do me a favor and stop at the store?" So I'm like, "Sure." And then she's like, "Can you pick me up this?" And then she lists like, 3 and then 6. Next thing you know, it's like 9 items. I'm grocery shopping for Bobby Brown. At this point, I'm broke. Go to the store. I don't know. It's probably $40, $50. I get there. She's like, "Do you want the money?" I'm like, "Nah, I got it." Thinking to myself, God, I hope I have enough gas to get home. so, so I go to her house. I'm helping her hang curtains. I'm standing on a ladder. It turns out the night she invited me over, her mom was actually there too. Taylor was not, but her mom was there. Um, and so I leave. And then, like the next day, Annie calls me and she goes, "So you went to Bobby's last night?" She called and told me. I was like, "Yeah, blah, blah, blah." And then she goes, "Do you want me to tell you what she said?" And I go, "Yeah." She said, "You looked kind of fat." And I was like, "Oh my God." I was horrified. I was like, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah." She said, "You looked a little chubby." And I was like, "What the fuck?" I'm like, but then again, I'm like, well, hang on. She's been dating a 6'2" skeleton for the last 2 years. I mean, what does Tommy weigh? 160, maybe, So she's like, "Bobby said you were fat." And I was so horrified. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed." So then at this point, me and Bobby are still friends. We talk on the phone. There was times when she was in Louisiana. She sent me cards. She wrote me some poetry. Still have it to this day. She's been a very sweet person to me. Then, then at some point we're on the phone again and we decide to go out to eat. We go to Casa Vega, this Mexican restaurant, and we're eating. And then, of course, I'm trying to talk my way into going to her apartment with her. She's like, "I don't know if that's a good idea." I'm like, "It's a great idea." So, long story short, we leave, we go to her place, and it's like 1 in the morning, and she says, "I'm going to take a bath." So I'm like, "Okay, great." She wants to get cleaned up. So she's in the bathroom, smoking her cigarette, drinking wine, doors shut, hear the water running. She's talking to me through the door, talking her brains out. And I'm like, "What do I do?" I'm like, "Well, she said I was fat. Maybe I should quick do a workout." I'm in my fucking boxer shorts doing push-ups. I'm doing crunches. I'm doing jumping jacks. I'm stretching. I'm like, if I can get in shape in the next 15 minutes, I got it. So I'm literally like, I'm listening. I'm like, okay, she's definitely in the tub. Let me do another set. So I'm cranking off push-ups and sit-ups in Bobby Brown's bedroom at 1:30 in the morning. And I'm looking at her dresser, looking at all the photos. And she comes out, she's in a negligee, smoking her cigarettes. At some point, she wouldn't shut up. Bobby talks probably more than me. So at one point, I just took her cigarette, I put it out, I took her glass. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I just pushed her on the bed and game on. So that was one of the times we hung out, and it was awesome. Bobby's awesome. We had a lot of fun. And the next morning, it was daylight, and she was eating a bowl of cereal, and I was like, "I gotta go. I gotta go to work." It was like 6 in the morning. I went home, got my shit organized, and an hour later, I was on my way to the office to the moving company. But yeah, Bobby's awesome, and she's still my friend to this day. I love her.
And you may be thinking, like, you're the guy after Tommy Lee, but everything we've read online said that Stevie doesn't pale in comparison to Tommy Lee. So there you go. All right.
Yeah, no, I handled myself, and and of course, Annie gives me an update after, and then I heard from all kinds of friends, Sharice's brother Gary and Crane and all the guys were like, "Dude, what's up? You heard you and Bobby are hanging out, whatever." And like I said, we've remained friends, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for Bobby. She's an awesome person, and her and I have always gotten along good.
Yeah.
And maybe I was the friend she needed for a little bit of rebounding, a
Yep.
couple of dates, a couple of hangs, phone calls, whatever.
Mhm.
I don't think it was ever going to go anywhere past that. But we remained friends the whole way, and I have nothing but love for her.
And she seems to be in a good place now, so good for her.
Totally. She's in a great place, which is awesome.
Yeah. Okay, you put out Religious Fix in 95, but that's also the year that you split up.
Yep.
Michael's gone, Todd's gone, and how was your relationship with George at the end?
George and I, we're the two, the two sole survivors, so to speak. Everyone else had bailed, and even replacement guys along the way had bailed, for whatever reason. But me and George were total opposites, and I guess maybe that's why it still worked. He still was a smoker. He was smoking pot. He used plenty of cocaine, which evolved into speed or meth. And for anybody that knows anybody that gets involved with that, it's the devil. It ruins people. And the stuff that was happening with George and some of his personal choices in life were affecting the band, and I didn't like it. I mean, it's a miracle, and I don't say this to be mean or be a big shot, but he's lucky I never actually went after him. If I had ever really physically went after him, I would have probably beat him, into the emergency room. But I refrained. And then even after the band broke up, I heard all these more horror stories of stuff that he had done, you know, with people or behind my back, and drug related and female stuff, and just stuff, some really, really ugly things. I really hope that at some point George has gotten his life back together. I haven't talked to him in more than a decade.
Okay.
I knew that he was still struggling with a lot of things over
Right.
the years, but there was some really unforgivable behavior that happened. And for that, when I decided to get the band back together, even though I did give him 3 opportunities in 2003, 4, and 5 to come back, he basically stepped on it, ruined it, and shit on it every single time. So
Okay. Well,
no more George.
okay. All right. Um, so at what point are you like tough is done? And I mean it's 95, but are you like, okay, it's time to put it away?
Yeah, Thanksgiving in '95. That was it. I just said, this is done. I'm 29. I'll be 30 in the spring of '96. So it was just like changing of the guard. A few months after that, I also moved out of we had a band house that I had for like 4 or 5 years. And I said, had some roommates, some of the guys were friends and whatever, but I was just like, I'm moving. I'm turning 30. The band's over. This decade's about ready to be over for me, meaning my 20s. So
Mhm.
it just, in '96, it was like I kind of had a rebirthing, a new, just a fresh start. No Tuff, no band house. Moved in with a roommate and was working a job, and just going forward.
And around 95, 96, all of a sudden the Green Bay Packers and Brett Favre start just going nuts and going to the
Yeah.
Super Bowl. And that kind of leads to your next thing, right?
Yeah. So it's the fall. I'm working at the moving company. I'd been working there off and on for years. Um, and I had this idea to do something like what the Chicago Bears did when they won the Super Bowl, and they did the Super Bowl Shuffle. It was with the players, kind of a theme song related to the team. So I just had this weird idea one day. I was just like, that'd be cool to do a project that was all about the Packers. And then it kind of evolved into not just the Packers, but Wisconsin. I came up with this name, CWA, Cheeseheads with Attitude, a play on, NWA.
Yep.
Then I decided to call the EP Straight Out of Wisconsin. Recorded an EP for $900 over a weekend at Cornerstone Studios, the same studios that we did the Tuff Fist First record at.
Yeah.
And then I did a photo shoot with Anna Maria DeSanto with my two buddies, wrote all these fun rap parody kind of pop Weird Al Yankovic style songs, but everything was kind of based on being from Wisconsin. And both of the other guys, Jamie and Mark, also were from Wisconsin. And we were kind of like a Beastie Boys thing. We're trading off the vocals. And in doing it in the studio, when we recorded Where the Hell is Nina, we were all laughing our ass off. It's a parody of Funky Cold Medina by Tone Loc. And that song, you know, um, manufactured a CD, started to sell it, started calling record stores and saying, "Hey, this is Stevie from Tuff. I have this new project. Can I put a couple CDs in your store?" These are stores in Green Bay, Oshkosh, Milwaukee, Wausau, Appleton.
Yeah.
Okay, send us 5 CDs on consignment. We'll give you $8 a piece. If they sell, we'll sell them for 10. I was like, okay. So I'm putting out CDs, the few I could, and sending them to radio stations. And then the song got picked up by WIXX radio in Green Bay. And literally overnight, the song became a #1 request. And that was November of '96. By February, the Packers had won the Super Bowl for the first time in 30 years. And that $900 investment, at this point, I had printed 45,000 copies of the record and generated over $250,000 in gross revenue, most profit in 90 days. Just exploded. And we're on the cover of USA Today. We're on ESPN, The Sports Babe. We're guests on the Jim Rome Show. We're playing, bars and bowling alleys and Packer parties and VIP Packer parties and going to games and meeting players. And all of this happened within just literally 2 or 3 months' time. And the amount of money that came in was mind-boggling for me, um, $250,000 in a couple of months is a lot of money,
Yeah.
especially for somebody that at that point had probably never made more than 60 grand a year in my life,
Right.
So it just exploded. And then the next year was another record and another great 6-figure year. And then the next year was another record. And so for most of the rest of the '90s, I was really concentrating on the Cheeseheads. I was living in Wisconsin for a month, 2 at a time through the football season. And Tuff had all become, but kind of a afterthought.
Yeah.
And at that point, we had even done VH1's Where Are They Now?
Yeah.
And me and Michael and Todd, and they asked us about what we were doing. And Michael was talking about his bagel business, and Todd was talking about his thrash band, and I was talking about my Cheesehead band,
Right.
And on those same episodes of Where Are They Now was like Anthrax and Jackal and Bobby Brown. And so that was the first little hint at the end of the '90s that there was a little bit of interest of where are they now?
Yeah.
Tuff. Here we are,
Did you ever get to the point where you were like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to get a 9 to 5 and I'm going to quit trying all this. I mean, I think I know the answer, but I mean,
No.
was that ever a consideration?
No, I mean, I've always been a creative guy, and whether it was with Tuff or the Cheeseheads or the website or even taking on the position as manager slash fifth member of Veins of Jenna, the Swedish band, I've always just been creative that way. And I'm not a conforming normal guy when it comes to, I worked at a moving company which started as me as a helper, then a driver, then a dispatcher, office manager. I can help run a business,
Yeah.
but I'm not a suit and tie guy. I'm not a briefcase guy.
Yeah.
I'm not a corporate guy, so to speak. But when you get in this business, if you get to a certain level, there is some aspects of that,
Yeah.
I mean, Nikki Sixx and Gene Simmons might not look like Elon Musk or some politician, but those guys are very shrewd businessmen and have had very big success. They're just wearing leather jackets and have longer hair, So,
Yeah. You put out a solo album in '98. Who the
yep.
hell am I? I CWA is going on at this time? Like, what makes you think, hey, this is the time for a Stevie Rachelle solo album?
I don't remember. I think Michael Raphael from Jailhouse was like, you should do a solo record. And at some point I thought, well, you know what? That's a good idea. Let's do that.
Okay.
So I started working on a few ideas, and Michael Raphael had co-wrote some of the ideas, a lot of them with me. And he's super talented in the studio. But I also wanted it to be different than Tuff,
Yeah.
and I was looking at, I was listening to a lot of country in the 90s and going to shows. I went to see Garth Brooks, Joe Diffie, Toby Keith, loved Clint Black, Brooks and Dunn, loved Tim McGraw, um, Dwight Yoakam, Alan Jackson. I was listening to all that. And I've always loved John Cougar,
Yeah.
Tom Petty. So the Who the Hell Am I record, as you see, is a very, very Americana,
Yep.
very acoustic, folky, singer-songwritery, and it's mellow, So that record, I'm very proud of it. It's great. It's weird because all the super diehard, super glam Motley Crue diehard till the day they die fans are like, this is fucking gay. Where the fuck, fucking brown coat, what's with these stupid, they didn't like it.
Right.
To the contrary, had I done a solo record and come out all like, everybody would be like, oh, okay, so it's just Tuff without the name. You're still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Ever heard of changing?
Right.
So it's that old saying, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I try to depart, do something different for a different angle. And I love that record. Some people really appreciated it, but a lot of the diehards that love the glam stuff, they thought it was dumb, or they thought the Cheeseheads was dumb. This is stupid. I'm like, I know it's so stupid. I made like $500,000 in 3 years. So everything's not the same,
I bought it right when it came out, and in '98 I was kind of going through my dark period, and
Right.
I was listening to a lot of singer-songwriter stuff. So I
Right.
thought it was great, and I'm not just saying that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you like it.
In 1998, I remember, the internet's out, and you're like, and I would just sit and scour for information on what was happening with my favorite hair metal bands.
Right.
There was no place to, maybe Metal Edge would have little blurbs here and there. Metal Edge was starting to suck right around then. And I don't know how I find it, but there's an interview with you on a website called Metal Sludge.
Yep.
And in a couple weeks, I'm like, fucking every day I'm on Metal Sludge and I'm refreshing it and trying to be like, ooh, as soon as there was something new. So, like, how do you come up with the idea, and how does Metal Sludge form for you?
Well, Metal Sludge was my idea, and it spawned because of my solo record. So I'm doing my solo record, and I'm doing shows with anybody I can. I played a show with Kip Winger. He was doing acoustic. I played a show with Gilby Clarke. I played a show with Juan Crociere. I think his band was called Blue Sunday or Blue Monday or something like that. So I was playing with guys that were also doing solo stuff, acoustic stuff, or independently of their bands. Obviously Juan was in Rat, Gilby was not in GNR, and Kip was out doing a lot of his acoustic stuff.
Yep.
So, and I remember calling Jerry Miller, rest in peace. Jerry's no longer with us, but I remember calling Jerry to tell her about the show that I was going to do with Kip Winger, and I wanted her to come. And it was at the Country Club. Again, this huge 1,200 seater was Kip, me, and a couple other bands. And there wasn't a lot of people there that ended up being there, probably a couple hundred. But I remember calling Jerry and trying to get her to come out. And she never replied. And normally she would, and she was always really nice to me. And then somebody in the industry, also female, also very connected in the industry, up there with the Jerrys and the Sharon Osbournes and all these women that were in the industry. She told me, I reached out to her and I said, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of Jerry. Have you talked to her? And she's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. It came down, she's like, Stevie, I was at her house when she played your voicemail message. We had just got back from lunch and I heard your message. And she said, Oh my God, doesn't he know it's over? Like, why is he even bothering? Nobody cares anymore. She told me that, and I was two things. I was super bummed out and I was super pissed off. And I thought, how fucking dare you? You know, I was one of your friends, and when you wanted to do an independent record for Metal Edge and none of the real signed bands would do it, Tuff was the one band, the main band on it. She did the Metal Edge Presents record with Bart Walsh, also who's no longer here. Rest in peace to Bart Walsh. Um, and I was friends with Jerry. I'd been to her place. You know, she'd always supported us in the magazine. And while in the 90s we got little to no support, Paul Gargano did a couple little blurbs here and there. But as you said, it was mainly about Typo Negative and Korn and everything else.
Yep.
But I wanted her to come to the show. She spoke in a negative manner about me. It got back to me, never called me about it. And I was disappointed. I felt disrespected. It was that day that I said, screw this. I'm sick of asking people for press or for favors. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to build a website. The internet's this new thing. And literally, I swear off the top of my head, I said to myself, I'm going to call it Metal Sludge. And so I tell Sean about my idea, and he says, yeah, well, we could go on. He had a laptop. I had a laptop. He's researching. He finds this GeoCities place where you can build your own website. And we just started from there. In full disclosure, I do vaguely remember at some point in the history of a decade earlier, 6, 8 years, whatever, I do remember the Mad Magazine parody that came out that parodied Metal Edge and called it Metal Sludge. Um, but I do remember that, and perhaps maybe that was briefly in my brain because I don't remember owning the magazine, but I remember seeing it maybe at the newsstands or something.
Yeah.
And maybe that just planted itself in my head. So
Yeah.
now it's 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, and I said Metal Sludge. And we did take the Metal Edge logo and basically just used the Iron Maiden font and changed a couple letters.
Yep.
And that became our website. And of course, over the years, people went, you know, that used to be a parody that Mad Magazine did. And I was like, oh, that's right. You know?
Right.
And at some point, people thought it was all lifted from that, which it really wasn't. But just decided to go the route of the internet. And of course, at that point, we know it was so new.
Yeah.
Barely anybody was even online. When you think about the 400 million people, whatever that exists in the United States of America, or the billions around the world, the internet was in its infant stages. So it was brand new. We didn't know what we were getting into, and neither did anybody else. But we somehow cracked the code that this little idea that we had just started building. And first few days, it was 12 or 30 people that looked, and then 100, and then 800, and then 2,000. And then at some point, we're having 30, 40, 50,000 people per day log on, and the thing takes off.
You went anonymous. What was the thinking behind that? And didn't you kind of think like, hey, maybe if I was out there as Stevie, maybe that will bring in more fans? What was the decision making?
No, from the beginning, I said, well, let's do it anonymously. I said, because we were going to bust balls and we were going to tell secrets and talk gossip.
Yeah.
And I did think, well, if I do this, it's going to be, well, that's Stevie saying it. So I remember thinking to myself, let's do this like The Masked Magician or The Unknown Comic, and even like Kiss was in the early days where they had makeup, but they would never be seen without it. So I was like, let's do it without telling anybody. Let's just create this little thing and come up with a little moniker, a little ID, a name, a fun little, hey, I'm this guy, you're that guy. And again, we didn't know where it was going to go. There was no social media.
Yeah.
Little to no websites in the rock community even existed at that point. KNAC.com was online. That was mainly a radio station since late 96 or 97. I think melodicrock.com in Australia was on from like 97 or early 98.
Yep.
There was very few, but we became the place to go when it came to people that were interested in 80s rock, Sunset Strip, hair metal, hair bands, whatever. You know, Motley, Poison, Skid Row, Rat, Dokken, Warrant, Whitesnake, we became the go-to place. And then, we had all the little sub outlets with the forums and the chat rooms, and we would create our articles, and people started writing to us and telling us, hey, I went to this show, it sucked, here's my review. So we're like, cool, we'll put it up. Pick a funny name, I'm Dildo John, and we'd run their article, and they'd be like, oh my God, I'm on the internet, and then they'd share it with a friend, and it just snowballed.
Did you tell your closest friends? I mean, you must have told somebody besides you and Sean.
My roommate Richie knew, because the garage had, 2,000 shirts and hoodies and beanies. And even with some of the printers we worked with, there was a printer, Joe Right Rock. I love you, Joe. Right Rock Merchandise. He does all the merchandise for Monsters of Rock Cruise. We reached out to him, but we did it anonymously through an email and said, hey, we're interested to print these embroidered hats, beanies, trucker hats, jerseys, hockey jerseys, baseball jerseys, custom with, high dollar items too. Like our cost on some of these items were, the jerseys were $50 each. We'd sell them for $100. But we never told him who we were, but he got paid.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'll print the shit as long as I'm getting the money.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until years later that he found out who we were. We also wholesaled books like the Hollywood Rocks book and merchandise from Deadline Cleopatra Records. Same kind of thing. We reached out to them anonymously and said, we want to buy your books wholesale and resell them on our site. They didn't know for sure who I was, but as long as they got their payment, and then we got a guy to go pick everything up. We paid him and said, hey, go to this location in Los Angeles and pick up all this stuff. And you're our representative. And he did. So, and then we had P.O. boxes.
Yeah.
We had a P.O. box in Southern California. Then we had one in Minnesota. Then we had one in Indiana. We kept changing it like every year. And people, when they thought, okay, well, it's this place, it must be this person. Then we change it and they were like, now the P.O. box is in Minnesota. Now it's in Indiana. Who's really behind this? So I think we were trying to throw people off, but the longer we did it and the bigger the site got, it got a little harder because there's just more information, just more stuff is happening. I mean, I was in line more than once, at least 2 or 3 times. 3 times I can recall. I'm in line with literally like 2 or 3 mail bins full of packages, all which have a return Metal Sludge return stamp on them.
Yeah.
Bruce Kulick walks in. He's 2 people behind me. I was like, hey, what's up, Bruce? He's like, Stevie, how are you today? Got a lot of packages, huh? And I'm like, yeah. Try not to have him look at the floor so he sees what might be listed on some of the packages. A couple weeks later, Carlos Cavazzo's in the post office. A couple weeks after that, it's Chris Von Dahl from Cherry Street. I'm like, fuck, I can't go to this post office anymore. I'm running into too many guys and bands,
Yeah.
But we had a good run, man. And I'm happy to say the site's still online and it's not going anywhere.
Yep. Was there ever a point where you seriously thought we're gonna get outed? Maybe did anybody ever? Because I thought I heard that there were guys who were like, oh yeah, Metal Sludge, that's Stevie's site, before you outed yourself.
It was starting to get, I think people were starting to narrow it down. Jizzy got accused a lot. Ricky Rocket did. Right. Even Scott Ian did. And that's because they were also contributors.
Yep.
Ricky Rocket was doing Dr. Rocket. Scott Ian was very supportive. Jizzy and his wife at the time. There was other people that we would write to too. So what would happen is, even though you would log on to Metal Sludge and we do the thing called the Sludge Wire, where we'd take the news, just like Metal Edge used to do, but then we'd make little snarky comments after each little section. And so we would send that Metal Edge wire or some news stuff, and Sean would send it to Jizzy and Josie or Scott Ian or whoever else. And we'd say, hey, you got any funny one-liners to add to this? Send it. So they'd be like, okay, if Jizzy and Josie said, blah, 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 this guy and that guy, they'd make some snarky comment. We would just take one of their quotes and we'd attribute it to one of the Metal Sludge writers.
Okay.
So Janie Bonneal was in red. Donna Anderson was in pink.
Yeah.
Tammy Sex Slaughter was in, blue. This guy was in green, and they were all color coded. So we would basically color code a, a, a disc comment to one of the writers, which the
Yeah.
writers were really me and Sean, but
Yeah.
at some point it was also could be Jizzy or Josie or Scott Ian. Or
Yeah.
when we'd interview Phil Lewis, we'd ask him, hey, we'd interview Phil, but we'd go to Tracy and say, we're going to ask Phil a bunch of questions. Do you have anything to add? Tracy might go, ask him this.
Yeah.
And it might be something very personal or very inside that only a few people would know. Then we were going to interview Tracy. We'd go to Phil and we're going to say, we're going to interview Tracy now. You want to tell us anything? So
Yeah.
then Phil would give us something. But of course, we wouldn't say that in the interview. So at some point, we were kind of pitting the guys against each other.
Yeah.
Or rock star. If we knew there was a beef between this guy and Sebastian Bach or this guy and Jani, then we would reach out to that guy and go, hey, we're doing this thing on Jani. What do you think? And they'd feed us some dirt or something ugly. And then we would use it. Again, all of this was being attributed to Metal Sludge, but it wasn't just my opinion. It
Yeah.
wasn't just Sean's opinion. It was actually, in fact, probably community-wise, the opinion of many. And as I've even had people say to me in recent weeks when I've spoke out on maybe Matt Starr's, hey, you got to get paid like you're a rock star. I had a lot of people reach out to me and say, dude, thanks for speaking up.
Yeah.
That guy's a douche. I wouldn't have said that, but I couldn't agree more. He thinks he's more important than he is or whatever. So I'm kind of the mouthpiece for, you're thinking it, you're just not saying it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it, but I'm also saying it. And that's kind of what Metal Sludge was. And the thing that's crazy about Metal Sludge over the years is that when we ended up with the gossip boards, the forums, or the chat rooms, people would go on there all day and talk.
Yeah.
How many? Thousands. At some point, it was in the tens of thousands, 10, 15, 20, 25,000 different people logged on over the days or weeks or whatever. And some of those people would say really ugly things, and people would go, oh, it's on Metal Sludge. So then when it became known that, oh, that's Stevie Rachelle, you could go on there and say, I think this guy sucks. He's ugly. His wife is fat. And it's on Metal Sludge. Well, Stevie said your wife is fat. What a jerk. But really, it's some guy named Anthony from Fargo, North Dakota that wrote it. But because it's on my message board, which is
Yep.
attached to the Metal Sludge website, and because I own it, I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
So it's been a catch-22, and now it's, coming up on 30 years here, well before the internet was even established or any social media existed. It's taken on some life of its own at some point. It's also had to evolve. People say it's not the same. It's the same people complaining about Kiss. Yeah, we get it. Kiss is not the same in 2023 when they did their final shows as to what they were in 1973 or 83 or 93.
Yep.
They're now in their 70s. Of course it's not the same. Metal Sludge can't be the same in 2022 or 25 as it was in 1998 or 2005. The same way the internet wasn't the same. MySpace is dead.
Yeah. Was there ever a point where you or you and Sean felt bad? Like really going hard after Jani Lane or whoever, where you were like, I wonder if we're pushing this too far.
Maybe a little bit. And when I say a little, I mean a little. At the end of the day, we're not, I've read people online, even so, like, might not even be something Metal Sludge said. People, they see an article about Vince Neil, and you see the people go, oh my God, I feel so sorry for him.
Yeah.
We're feeling sorry for a guy that's burned through $100 million in his life. We're feeling, and I'm not saying that Vince is a bad guy, but it's like, oh, I feel sorry for him. Vince probably still owns 5 houses, and if he doesn't own 5, he's probably owns 2, and he's probably got 10 cars. Probably still makes hundreds of thousands, if not a 7-figure income per year.
Right.
he's lived like a rock god and a rock star since he was basically barely old enough to drink, as was Tommy. And along the way, yeah, he's probably done some dumb shit. He's had some bad mistakes in his life. He's also had some tragedy. It's horrible what happened with Razzle.
Yep.
It's horrible what happened with his daughter. It's horrible that he's had some health issues recently. It's also horrible that since Razzle and since his daughter, and even in the last, maybe not the last 3 years, but 10, 12, 15 years, in the last decade or so, too, he's been arrested for DUI again, drunken disorderly, and just kind of throwing caution to the wind and not really giving a shit and showing up 50 pounds overweight. At some point, you can only feel so sorry for a guy that's had millions of dollars and throws around $25,000 Rolex watches like they're disposable socks.
Yep.
You know, I don't have any sympathy for that. I don't
Yep.
feel sorry for that person.
Yep.
It's like, you know what I feel sorry for? I feel sorry for the real, true homeless person that's on the corner that's 75 years old and was a Vietnam veteran, and he's sitting on a bucket holding a tin can and his fingernails are filthy.
Right.
Not the fake homeless person on the side of the freeway. We'll work for food. It's like, dude, you're in your 30s. You got a beard. You look like you weigh 190 pounds. Go start chopping some wood, bro. Make it happen. You're not feeble, elderly, and, missing a limb.
Right.
So when people start trying to feel sorry for and go, don't bully Sebastian Bach, it's just like, did he really feel that threatened that a girl asked for a photo and a hug?
Yeah.
The guy goes on stage, starts fucking calling her a fucking dumb cunt and get the fuck out of here, you fucking bitch, because she wanted a hug.
Yep.
It's like, dude, you're a fucking asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. I was Sludgeaholic of the Month when I was in Iraq in 2004, if you remember that.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that now. I think you've talked about that, but now that you remember that, that you remind me, I do remember. And there's, over the years, I've had a lot of the Sludgeaholics reach out and say, dude, that was a great time.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of fun,
I got so many. I was in Iraq, and then I got so many email messages from even Stephen Sweet from Warrant. Anyway, what a thrill that was for me.
Right.
When did your relationship with Sean start to go downhill?
It was wavering for probably a year or two. And it just, it was, I equated it to being in a band.
Yeah.
At some point, I talked about whether or not we should come out of the closet, so to speak, because it was becoming harder and harder to kind of control it. And he was from Michigan at the time, and I'm here. So I'm going to clubs, shows, events. I'm backstage. I'm hanging out with, other quote unquote rock stars and people. And then all of a sudden I'd walk into a club and there'd be 3 or 4 people. And then all of a sudden somebody would go, man, did you read the 20 questions? Oh my God, that's hilarious. Blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, yeah, that was really funny. Hey, I'm going to get a Red Bull. Do you guys want anything? And run off to the bar to buy a Red Bull and a water. And they're all talking about it.
Yeah.
I know what the questions were. I knew what the answers were 2 weeks ago when they sent them in.
Yeah.
I'm on that inside. So I just felt really uncomfortable. And it just started to get more and more, it became harder, in 2003, we ended up sponsoring this tour, and
Yep.
we told the promoters, and I think it was Artists Worldwide with Chuck Bernal that booked it with Enough Snuff, maybe Faster Pussycat. And we were like, we'll promote it, but we have to get $500 from every club or we're not going to promote it on our site. And there was 37 shows, and every single promoter sent us a $500 blank money order. That was our rule. Send us a blank money order for $500 wrapped in paper to this P.O. box. When we get it, we'll take a picture and send it to you. Then we're going to cash it. And a money order, for the most part, they could probably trace it back, but it's not like a personal check. A personal check comes back to you. The money order goes to Western Union or wherever. They'll never see it again.
Right.
They bought it, sent it to us. And so 37 clubs sent us $500. And we never left the house.
Right.
That's $18,000.
Yeah.
And And then we sold merchandise, and then we're selling advertisement. At one point, we were getting $800 per ad on our site, and we'd have record labels, these indie labels like CMC and stuff, buying 2 or 3 ads a month just from one label. And
Yeah.
then at some points, we were making 5, 7, 8, 9 grand a month in advertisement. So the money's coming in.
Yeah.
Money was no object at
Yeah.
that point. We're pushing 6 figures, you know? And our overhead was like, you know, a server that was like $300 a month or something, you know? So, but Sean, he was a ball hog. You know, he wanted to write more. He was a great writer. He did come up with a lot of good stuff, but I did as well. Like I wrote articles and then we'd put it up, and then I'd contribute. I want to put something else up, and he'd go like, "Oh, I don't know, that didn't, you know, not many people like that." Or it was kind of like being in the band rehearsal room and saying, "Well, let's do this song." No, we did your song yet the other day. That's not that. Let's work on my song instead. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like songwriting credits. You know, there was a little
Yeah.
bit of jealousy or arguing over it, and I honestly just thought at the end of the day that if we did come out or when it was exposed, that I think Sean was going to feel inferior because people were going to say it's Stevie Rachelle from Tuff and his friend, this guy named Sean.
Right.
So I was ultimately probably going to get more of the shine, even if he was writing all the Ozzy Stillborn articles, which he was.
Right.
And he was Janie Bon Neal, the paragon of sludge, which he was, the ultimate master, you know, editor of the site.
Yep.
And so, you know, I think he felt a little Wizard of Oz-ish. He was
Right.
controlling everything behind the curtain. And if the curtain got pulled out, he was going to be like, oh no, pull that curtain back. You know, I am Ozzy Stillborn. You're
Right.
getting an FU award. And at some point, I didn't care if anybody got mad at me. Wasn't worried if anybody was going to try to threaten me. So we were not in agreement there. And at some point, little by little, we just became more disgruntled with each other or disappointed, and there was little moments where we'd have an argument. We wouldn't talk for a couple weeks at a time, but meanwhile the site's still going. He's doing his thing, I'm doing mine. And at some point it just got to a point where I don't think he wanted to do it. He had other things going on. He was working with other bands and did video editing and filming, and I was like, I don't want to stop it because it was also income that I needed and wanted. And
Sure.
so at some point it came to a head, and it got a little legal and it got a little ugly, and I won't go any further than that, but we
Okay.
ended up settling with each other and going our separate ways. And in recent years, we've actually had a couple of exchanges via email, which for the most part were kind of cool. We kind of got a little thing or two off our chest and went back and forth, but it's not for public consumption. At the end of the day, I wish him well with whatever he's doing, wherever he's at with his family and things like that, and hopefully he wishing me the same.
What was the blowback when you came out?
Honestly, it was way different than I thought. And while I wasn't worried, I really was kind of thinking what's going to happen. When I really pull the covers off, is it going to be 50-50? But then at some point I kind of thought more people would understand it than didn't. So I was thinking 60-40, 70-30, and I was way off. Because once I came out, to everybody that said something to me, it was literally like 98-99% were like, dude, you kick ass.
Yeah.
And very little, just a few people, a fraction, a percent or two that were kind of negative about it.
Right.
So I was pleasantly surprised that more people were supportive. And the site did exactly the same thing for probably several more years.
Yeah.
2004, 2005, even 6, 7, 8. But there came a point or two along the way that it became a little overwhelming, because I also had my daughter in 2004, my son in 2005. I meet Veins of Jenna in the summer of 2005, decide to work with them. They come here in the spring of 2006. Now Veins of Jenna is taking off. That whole thing became another load of work, you know, for like 5 years straight. Record deals, tours, money, endorsements, just a whole nother. I'm getting, my kids are now 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and they're getting older. So my responsibility, and then Tuff's back together. So I'm doing Tuff, and I'm occasionally doing the Cheeseheads, and I'm managing Veins, and I got a couple of kids, and mail order, releasing independent records and signing other bands and putting things out. And then I'm supposed to still do Metal Sludge.
Yeah.
So it started to slow down. And at some point, I'm like, well, this is 10 years old. We've already interviewed 300 or 400 different rock stars. And a lot of those rock stars we interviewed a second time for the rewind, and a third time for the three wind, and a fourth time for the back for more. And we even did some that were the fifth interview for the 5 wire. And then there was going to be the sixth interview, which was going to be the 6 pack. And then there was the best of Sludge with, you know, it's just, you know, by doing this video channel for a couple years,
Yeah.
as does Jason Green and the guys from Get on the Bus. It's great when your video gets 30,000 hits,
Yeah.
and you get a couple little monetization checks coming in, but there's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You guys do a lot of work. Doing a website like this is a lot of work. Being a 2-time father and managing these 4 young kids from Sweden and juggling everything. And I'm still trying to go to the gym and work out and get laid and watch football and UFC and NASCAR and go skateboarding. I didn't have time to sleep, you know? So Sludge kind of fell off a little bit here and there, but hey, it's like Kiss releasing The Elder. It's like, what the hell is that? Give us something different, you know?
There were some periods where yeah, I remember going, shit, how come they're not putting anything out? But it seems like lately,
Didn't have the brain power. As
right.
My day was shot, you know?
Sure. But it seems like lately it's I mean, you're doing stuff all the time.
Takes, you know, my kids are now adults.
Yeah.
My
Right.
son's 20, my daughter's 21. They're both in UC Berkeley. My son was here he's stayed with me most of the summer. He's working out. He's fucking bigger than I am. You seen the pictures.
Oh, I know he looks like a fucking model, pardon my language. Holy shit.
He's built like a brick shit house too. He's massive. He's like, and they're both so smart. So I'm so proud of them. But yeah, I've been working on Sludge a lot more because there's more time now.
Yeah.
You know, it all depends. You know, having projects, being busy is great, but at some point, man, it's
Yeah.
I can juggle. I can juggle 3 balls. You know, you put a 4th ball in there, not likely. 5, no way. So when you got all those things happening at once, I guess it can be a blessing and a curse. You know, it's good to have that stuff happening, but some points, it's like I equated it to when you talk about people like, you know, a cook. It's got a pan of beans, some meat, potatoes, corn. You know, this one, you stir this one, you know, turn this heat down, turn this heat up. Oh, this one's boiling. You know, you got to address things as they become necessary. So when Veins of Jenna was percolating and something was happening with a tour about to start, or, you know, and meanwhile, I'm going to Europe and Germany and Brazil and Australia and trying to do out of the country tours for a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, that, you know, it's consuming. It's overwhelming at points.
Were you leery of working with Veins of Jenna? I mean, here you got this young, crazy rock band who's probably into partying and whatever. You're an old, not old, but older guy who's sober,
Yeah.
and clean living. Like,
No, it had its, you know, there was times when it got a little hectic. I mean, they come here, I meet them. They're literally 2 of them had just turned 19. All young kids from Sweden, and then I bring them to my house. I let them stay here, and MySpace is happening. And at some point, they invite a couple girls over, and you know, I'm in my kitchen doing dishes. These 2 girls show up at the door. They look young, but then again, so does the guys in Veins of Jenna. They're 2 of them are teenagers themselves. So these couple girls are hanging out with them. They're in the backyard, I don't know, by the fire pit with the barbecue. They're playing acoustic guitar and talking. One of the girls comes in. She's like using the bathroom. Then she says, "Do you know where Jackie is?" Meaning the drummer. And I'm like, I don't know. It's either, you know, house is big enough. They have their own room. So I'm like, he's either in his room or in the backyard. And then at some point, those girls left. So I says to the guys, I said, "How old were those girls?" And they're like, I think they're 15 or 16. I was like, are you guys out of your mind? And I'm thinking, like I'm at the time 40, 41 or something.
Yeah.
But I was like, 15 or 16, are you guys nuts? They're like, well, what are you talking about? Again, Jackie and Nikki had just graduated high school. They were only like 19 themselves. But I'm like, you guys, you can't have underage girls. And they're like, oh, in Sweden, the age of consent is like, well, we're not in Sweden.
Yeah.
And neither are you. So don't invite any 15 or 16-year-old girls to the house anymore. Um, and yeah, they got drunk. They did stupid shit. They I had to knock them into shape a few times. They wanted to do things their way, and I'm trying to help them. And then, of course, things are happening. They're getting success. They're getting tours. Suddenly, they're endorsed, free gear. They're on MTV, Bam Margera. They're on tour buses. They're on tour with Poison and Rat and
Yeah.
War and Cradle of Filth, and just, I mean, all this stuff is happening. And two of them at that point were just barely old enough to get beer. I'm like, you guys don't even realize how fortunate you are with all this stuff happening. So did I ever think to myself, is this a good idea or not? I don't know. When I jumped in. I went in at full speed ahead. I told them I was going to make all this stuff happen. And I promised them this. I said, everything that you want to have happen, to be in a band, I guarantee I can make every single dream you've ever had happen, except for two things. I cannot guarantee you to go gold or platinum, and I cannot guarantee that you'll become a millionaire. But every single thing else, I guarantee it will happen. You'll be signed, you'll be on tour, we'll go on buses, you'll be on MTV, you'll be on the radio, you'll be on magazines, you're going to go around the world. Free equipment, free girls, free drugs, more free girls, more free drugs, a lot more free girls, more free gear, and little by little, it's funny because I would tell them in meetings what we were going to do for the next 3 months. I would bring those calendars from the Walgreens, with like January, February, March,
Yeah.
and I would mark down what we're going to do, what we're going to do on what dates, and by what point we're going to accomplish things. And at some point, they kind of said to me, why do we always have to have these meetings? And it was paperwork. I'm bringing numbers and details and calculators, and I'm like, do you guys think that the soccer teams and the football teams and the basketball players just go out on the floor and do that game and it just happens like that? No, for the whole week, aside from practice, they're in rooms with overhead projectors with coaches telling them exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and why it's going to work and how it's going to happen so they can win the game. I said, we're preparing for the tour that's going to happen in the summer, or the recording studio, or the merchandise that we need to design now that's going to be made in 3 months for the tour. And they didn't realize all that. They just wanted to get drunk
Yeah.
and party and play shows. And I was doing the business side of it. And then little by little, everything, Anthony, I'm telling you, every single thing I predicted happened. And at some point, on more than one or two occasions, they pulled me aside or we're in rehearsal and they go, how come everything you say is going to happen happens? You're always right and we're not. And I'm like, well, you're 20, I'm 40. I've been doing this as long as you've been alive. Okay. Give me a little credit. But it became challenging, but it was also extremely rewarding to go from square one, like saying to myself, I'm going to buy a one-way ticket. I'm going to LA. I'm going to join this band. I have an idea. I'm going to create this website. I have this crazy idea about this Packer thing. I want us to be like the Beastie Boys. We're going to sing about the Packers. And, 3 years and $500,000 later, and to this day, the Cheesehead still gets played. You could go to any Packer game or any Packer event or any Packer bar around the globe. And I guarantee you, if you're in there for the duration of the game, you're going to hear our songs between 1 and 10 times. Guaranteed. So when I decided to manage Veins of Jenna, and then within less than 2 years from meeting them, they were on tour with Poison and Rat, main stage, playing amphitheaters across North America. I was like,
What made you think that you could do that with a glam band in 2005, 2006?
well, it happened, right?
It did. But I mean,
Yeah. And here's the thing. From the beginning, I meet them I saw them one time for 30 minutes on July 30th of 2005 at the Whiskey at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. First band of 10. They played 30 minutes, 6 songs, 5 half-ass originals and a Motley Crue cover. And I was like, they have something.
Yeah.
3 days later, or 2 days later, I called Gilby Clark. I said, Gilby, I need a favor. I need you to demo this band, blah, blah, blah. He goes, okay, a couple weeks from now, I got time. I said, no. I need to do it before Wednesday. They leave on Thursday to go back to Sweden. He's like, dude, I just got home from a tour with Heart. I'm swamped. I said, Gilby, let me come over to your house right now. Give me 10 minutes. Let me come to your house. I want to play you something. I want to show you something. He's like, okay, come over. I drove to his house, played him an EP that they had, which was actually pretty good, and a couple of images. And he looked at me and he goes, you're right. There's something here. This has got a Guns N' Roses, Hanoi. There's something here,
Yeah.
you know? And I asked CC DeVille to come see them at the Cat Club. I was at the Cat Club. They were about to play. Somebody said CC was at the Rainbow. I walked onto the Rainbow. I saw him. He was sitting with some people. I said, dude, what are you doing in 30 minutes? He goes, I'm finishing eating. What do you want, Stevie? I said, please come and see my band. I'm managing this band. They're at the Cat Club. We're going on at about 10 o'clock. Just come in for a song. Please. Okay, I'll be there. So CC walks in. They start to play. He stayed for the whole show. He comes up to me afterwards and he's like, oh my God, this kid is a rock star. This singer kid, this Lizzie, oh my God, this kid is a rock star, Stevie. What the hell? Where did you find them? You know? I hope my CC impression's pretty good.
Yeah, that's
But
pretty spot on.
CC, love them. First night of the tour, Stephen Piercy, love them. Tracy Guns, love them. Ricky Rocket saw them at the Knitting Factory. I'm in the dressing room after the show. Joe Sutton, the promoter from Club Vodka, comes and knocks on the door. He said, Stevie, Ricky Rocket's here. He wants to come in and meet the band. I said, send him in. Ricky comes in. I was like, what's up, dude? He didn't know I was their manager. He's like, you guys were amazing, blah, blah, blah. I want to endorse you. The drummer. Everybody that saw them,
Yeah.
okay, not everybody. A lot of people that saw them immediately said, something's here. Bam Margera. So I meet Bam with Mark Weiss at Lon Friend's birthday party at the House of Blues. Bunch of people. Mark Weiss is in town. I talk to him. He says he's going to come. He says, can I bring Bam Margera with me? I says, absolutely. I want to meet. I'd met Bam one other time, but I said, I'm bringing my band. They're from Sweden. He'll probably like them. That day, I told the guys, I said, we're going to the House of Blues tonight. I said, JP, wear my sweatshirt. I got a hoodie from Yerke from 69 Eyes. He gave me the hoodie. I said, wear this hoodie tonight. Bam loves 69 Eyes. And we're going to meet him tonight. He's going to see your hoodie and he's going to start to talk to you. Watch. We go to the fucking House of Blues. Lon Friend's there. Mark Weiss comes in. Mark introduces me to Bam. Bam walks up. I said, hey, what's up, dude? I'm a skater too. I met you before, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, where are you guys from? JP, Jackie, Nikki, Lizzie, all standing there looking like these Hanoi Rocks abortions, you know? And they're like, we're from Falkenberg, Sweden, you know? So they start, he's like, oh, I hang out in Gothenburg all the time, blah, blah. And within 30 seconds, Bam looks at JP and goes, dude, killer hoodie. And I just looked at JP and winked. Bam's like, I got to see your band. When are you guys playing next, you know? I said, well, we don't have any shows, but I said, you know, probably have something coming up in a couple weeks. They're filming Jackass 2, the movie here. So I said, give me your number if you want me to get it. He's like, here, take my number down. I want to see these guys play. So the next day I call Happen and Harry, who promotes a Sunday night at the Cat Club. Happen and Harry's a promoter that's been on the scene in LA forever, originally from Chicago. Shout out Happen and Harry. I call him up. I said, Harry, I said, I want my band to play your jam night on Sunday at the Cat Club. He goes, dude, I'm packed. I can't. I'm overbooked. I said, I don't care what time I go on. First slot, last slot, just give me 30 minutes. He's like, I'm so booked. I said, dude, I have to do this. Bam Margera wants to see the band. I want this to be a little showcase for the band. I don't even care if they go on at 6 p.m. Just give me 30 minutes. So he said, okay, let me call you back. So he calls me back like an hour later and he says, you know, 8:30. I'll give you 8:30. You got 30 minutes. I said, done. So I called Bam the next day. His assistant answers. They're on the set. And I said, hey, this is Stevie. I manage Veins of Jenna. I want Bam to come see this band. I met him the other night at the House of Blues. He wants to come see them. It's going to be this Sunday. So Bam shows up with Ryan Dunn. Ryan's the one who died, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shows up with Ryan. They walk in, and of course, I'm on the phone with him and his assistant for 2 or 3 days before, including that Sunday. I said, "Hey, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. When you guys didn't shoot?" He's like, "We'll be done at 6 or 7." I said, "Hey, the band's on at 8:30 sharp tonight. Be there by a little after 8." Bam walks up at 8 o'clock. Walks in. He's already met the guys at House of Blues. So they're talking. Never saw them play. They kick into the first song. Bam's sitting there with me with a drink. There's 50 people there, maybe. And they're about 45 seconds into the first song. And he goes, "Do you want a record deal?" And I said, "Dude, that'd be great. We're releasing our record right now. It's done. We're putting it out. It's called Lit Up, Let Down." He's like, "Dude, I'm serious. Do you want a record deal or not?" I said, yeah, I'd love that. He goes, "Dude, I know people." And I'm like, he's stirring his drink. "I know people." I said, "Bam, I know you know people." He goes, "Do you know who Terry Hardy is? That's my manager. He manages Tony Hawk. Dude, I'm going to make this happen." And I'm like, "Dude, no problem." He's like, "You better call me tomorrow." "Dude, I know people that can make this happen." I was like, "Bam, I believe you." I realize your level of power. And at this point, dude, Jackass is at its pinnacle.
Yep.
Bam's throwing, $100,000 Hummers off cliffs for a fucking joke. So I leave that night, 1 a.m. Bam's calling my phone drunk. "Dude, where are you? We're doing a record deal." you know, this is during their 90-day stay
Yeah.
that I pre-planned for the summer of 2006 to get them a record deal. And so within a minute of seeing them, Bam said, "We're getting signed." This was in July of 2006.
Mhm.
By October, the record was in the store. Our shirt was in 600 Hot Topics across the country between Buck Cherry and Guns N' Roses. And we were on the Triple Threat Hot Topic tour with Fireball Ministry and Artemis Piledriver. I went out as the tour manager, merchandiser, roadie, agent, manager, you name it, did everything. But full disclosure, I did leave for 5 days during Halloween because I flew home so I could take my kids trick or treating. Then I flew back to Nashville on like November 2nd to pick up the rest of the tour. And that was the first 6 months of Veins of Jenna's life in the United States, when I said to them, "I'm going to make this happen for you. Let's go." And so from there it took off.
I mean, we were all so, or like people like me, we're all so jacked that there was this new band
Right.
that was, like you said, Hanoi Rocks-ish. I bought that shit right away. So what, like, okay, Lit Up, Let Down comes out and they get the big tour. Like, what happens next with you
Well,
and Veins?
they first did the EP, which was the demos. They did like 4 songs or 5 songs on their own. They had a demo made. It was an EP CD. Then when we recorded with Gilby, we did 2 or 3 songs with him. So then we took their demos and the stuff we did with Gilby and then repackaged it as the demos.
Okay.
So that was technically the first record. Lit Up, Let Down is the second record.
Okay.
Then we go in to record The Art of Telling Lies with Brent Woods, which was the third record. Put that out. And at this point, they've already started to tour in other parts of the world. In Sweden, they go home and play Sweden rock, and some other parts of England and Denmark. And of course, they'd been back and forth across the United States doing a ton of club shows all over the West Coast. They were obviously buzzing. There was bands like this, like Crash Diet in Sweden, Hardcore Superstar. Obviously, the 69 Eyes and Him had been around a little longer and started getting a lot of exposure through Bam. And they had a whole new generation of young people that were following them and into them. Bam and all the skater kids. Kat Von D really liked them, so she invited us to open up her LA Ink store. They were there for that. And it just went through the motions. 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, another tour, another this, another that, more endorsements, more, you know. But Lizzie started getting a little burned out, I think.
Okay.
He was the old man, so to speak. And I remember we did the Art of Telling Lies, we did the Get It On video, then they went to the East Coast and back. They shot Mind Pollution with Noah Schulman. Noah Schulman is Derek Schulman's son. Derek Schulman signed Bon Jovi, Cinderella, and Slipknot,
Yeah.
among many others. Derek Schulman was a massive heavyweight in the industry in the 80s and 90s. So his son was the videographer and director and producer of the video for Mind Pollution that they did in New York City. They come back, it's 2009. Michael Monroe's coming to LA for the first time in forever. Veins of Jenna is the hottest band in town. So we naturally get the support slot to open up for him at the Viper Room and a couple other dates. Well, after those dates, that long weekend, that Sunday, Lizzie sent us a message. We were less than a month from them going to Europe for 40 shows, 40 days, like 30 some shows, $40,000+ on the books, minimum, plus merchandise. It would have probably been $100,000 tour. And Lizzie said, can we postpone everything? I want to stay here and get married to my girlfriend. And I was like, postpone everything? It's like 3 weeks away, you know? So that whole thing took on a life of its own, back and forth. Lizzie didn't want to go. You know, we had legit visas that had been renewed multiple times, but their visas were having to be renewed when they went there again. And he, for some reason, thought that they wouldn't get renewed. There was also a little bit of friction between him and Nikki, the guitarist.
Okay.
Typical singer guitarist fighting, you know, Dave, Eddie, Slash, Axel,
Yep.
Joe, Steven, all the way down the line. So, but at the end of the day, he's like, I'm 27, I can't do this forever. And he's kind of having those kind of thoughts. And I said, 27, dude, I wish I was 27. You know, at the time I was 42 or whatever. So I was
Yeah.
like, Lizzie, come on.
Yeah.
But then Lizzie he opted to walk away from it. And it was a punch to the gut because all of what we had built, you know, and a lot of people had said for a couple of years, they're like, if that band would have had a crazy bitch like Buck Cherry,
Right.
they could have went to the moon and back.
Yeah.
But, you know, while they had some really good songs and the Art of Telling Lies turned out to be a great record, it really is. It smokes the other two. It ran its course, you know. Now it's 2009 going on 2010. It's Lizzie's 27. The other guys are 24, 25. They're getting a little older.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we don't want to ride around in a van anymore. We only want to do tours if we're in a bus.
Right.
Like, we only want to go if it's arenas, you know, or whatever. And I'm like, guys, you can't do that, you know? Can you still see me? My light just went out. It's okay.
Yep.
But again, infighting, a little of this, a little of that, and the tensions just built. They got a different guy to do some dates, but within a year, it was just like, it wasn't the same. And then everybody just said, game over.
Okay. And
So that's the end of Veins of Jenna.
And I don't have much left here, so I know I'm keeping you so long.
It's all good. For anybody that's still watching, thanks. Sometimes I'm long-winded too, and we've been wanting to do this for a long time. So I appreciate anybody that's still hanging around and listening to this endless interview.
Absolutely. And I've wanted this entire history for so long. So was there any opportunity to play like Rocklahoma around 08? Any thought of doing Tuff stuff, you know, in those years?
Well, we've never got officially offered by Rocklahoma, but there's some of those side stages, and I've had some people say, hey, you want to play this side stage or that side stage? You know, no disrespect, but I'm not playing Sam from Retro Respect Records side stage with the regional bands. I'm just not doing that, you know? But I mean, we've played Rock Timber a couple times. We've played M3. We played obviously Cat House Live and Hair Nation Live that were out here, the big festivals on the California coast. Played the 80s in the Park a few different times in Florida. We played the Hair Metal Holiday in Texas. We've played the Waterfest in Wisconsin a few times. And a ton of clubs, obviously. We've done the cruises.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing is, playing on those events and those festivals or taking tours isn't always about whether it's available or even offered. It's also, do you want to do it?
Yeah.
And what does the finance break down to? And what is the money that you can make?
Yeah.
And how many dates is it? And where's everyone else at? You know, at this point, certain guys are out touring. Maybe they don't have any kids, or they don't have a wife, or they have no other means of income. You know, I've always had a half a dozen income streams, so to speak. I do a little bit of Tuff, the Cheeseheads over the years, manage this band, a website, you know, mail order business, record label. You know, I do some eBay, I do some Amazon. You know, been hired to do other projects, whether I'm singing with Shameless for 6 or 8 records over 20 years, or this band in Brazil. Even did some cover bands and stuff like that in the early mid 2000s. So I don't always want to go on tour.
I get it.
Like right now, I know Trickster, Enough's Enough, and some of those bands will go out and do a lot of these runs. Trickster hasn't been out in a long time, so I think they're doing okay numbers and they're probably getting okay money. Steve and PJ had kind of been hibernating with that band for a long time, but now in the last year and a half or so, they've went out and done a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Chip is a crazy man.
He is.
Chip's Enough does 100 or 150 tour dates a year, and if somebody said we'll give you 250, he'll be at them.
Yeah.
He's all over the board. That dude, without a doubt, is one of the, if not the hardest working guy in this industry. I mean, he is, and he's not a young pup,
No.
you know, and he's wearing many hats, more than just those Sergeant Pepper's looking hats. He's singing, he's playing bass, he's the leader, he's writing, he does every interview, he does every infomercial, he does every interview, he's on every Facebook Live. He's just out there. But sometimes I say to myself, do I want to drive between Kansas and North Dakota and Iowa and Oklahoma again and play on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or Thursdays when there's 75 people there or 100, you know? And depending on who I'm playing with, you know, I could be first slot, second slot, or am I headlining? And then it's my band too. Hey, guys, can you do this? Well, Billy's married with 3 kids. Todd's married and has his job, and Michael's got his businesses, and this guy's got his stuff. And so everybody's stuff has to line up so we can all say, yes, for that 10 days, I'm free. Let's go do our thing. So it's a little, it's putting the juggling balls in the air again and trying not to drop them.
Speaking of Michael and Todd came, now I'm not sure when Todd came back, and then Michael just has recently been announced that he's gonna be playing shows. I don't know if he's like the permanent drummer again or what, but they have like what led to those two going, you know what? It's time to go back to the mothership.
Well, Todd, you know, Todd and me, when he left the band, there was bad blood, and he didn't talk to me for probably the better part of a decade. And he went off doing his thrash band, you know, Black and Substance D. Had a little success, had a couple indie deals, even did some tours in the US and even in Europe a little bit. But at some point, you know, we had become friends again. And I was just telling him, like in probably the early mid 2000s, I'm like, Todd, why don't you play with me? And he was like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, listen, we're not wearing spandex. We're not doing choreography. Nobody's ratting their hair up, you know. No. But he kept pushing it off like he just wasn't interested. And I said, let's do this. Let's just go to rehearsal. Let's just get in a rehearsal room on a Sunday night and jam. Yeah. You know, you and me and T and Jack or whoever's playing guitar with us. And he decided to do it. And we had a blast. And he was like, wow, this was fun, you know. And I'm like, yeah, it's real fun, you know. And so then at some point I got offered, you know, for us to go to Mexico, which he had never played Mexico. So we went and played Mexico. We opened for Skid Row and Enough's Enough. He loved it. At some point I took him to Brazil. He had never been to Brazil. Loved it. Started doing the cruises. He loved it. Took him to England and Scotland. We played a bunch of shows over there. He'd been to England once with Tuff. but Scotland is where I think his parents are from. So he was really excited to go play in Scotland. We played 3 shows like Edinburgh, Glasgow, etc. And so over the years, Todd started to see like, hey, listen, it's not Tough 1987, and it's not full time.
Right.
We're not living together. We don't have to go flyer. We don't have to rehearse 3 nights a week. You know, sometimes we don't see each other for 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
And then I call up and say, hey, we got this happening. We got that happening. We fly into town. We rehearse once or twice, go knock out a couple club shows. And next thing you know, we're on a cruise ship and everyone's enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
Or, you know, since we've also went to Australia, he never got to go to Australia before.
Yeah.
So then Michael, at some point in the last few years, started saying like, I should get up and jam with you guys some night. And I kind of thought he was just pipe dreaming, but he started saying it more and more and more. So at some point I said, you want to get up and jam with us at the Whiskey? And he said, yeah. And I said, are you sure? Like, let's not start putting the cart before the horse if you're going to not want to do it. And then he came and rehearsed with us. It was awesome. He played the Whiskey show. He did like, I don't know, 3 or 4 songs. And it was just, it was great. Played great. He had a lot of fun. And I said, you know, it'd be great if Michael wanted to step in. And so at some point we decided, you know, Michael said he wanted to come back, and with us getting ready to do this next cruise, I thought it'd be a great opportunity for Michael to be involved and go on the cruise, bring his wife, and obviously can meet a lot of fans on there because there's people from all over. And Michael's been out of the loop since 93. 93 was the last time he played live with Tuff, and 2023 was, you know, the fall he did that Whiskey show.
Yeah.
You know? So now this year has been a very slow year. There's been nothing going on other than I did a few shows. But next year, there's a few things up our sleeve, which we'll be talking about in the coming months, which is also why I started doing a couple podcasts and interviews in the last couple of weeks. So there's going to be some announcements coming up in probably November and early December.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll just, is there ever a chance of you putting out new music of any kind, let alone maybe Tuff putting out new music?
I'd say at this point, that's a stretch. If
Okay.
anything, it would most likely just be a song or 2, maybe a specialty song.
Sure.
But there is, I will say this, that in 2026, American Hair Metal is being released. And American Hair Metal, Tuff American Hair Metal, is the reissue remaster of American Hair Band.
Ooh.
And it's going to be vinyl and CD and digital.
Okay.
And even though that song appeared on the History of Tuff,
Yep.
I'm not replicating or remanufacturing that exact title or that piece. But
Okay.
that song, some of those songs and some others are being retitled, kind of like Decadation was.
Yep.
This will be the 25th anniversary of American Hair Band, which will appear on the new release American Hair Metal. And that's also going to contain the remake we did with Good Guys Wear Black with George Lynch.
Yep.
And Jamie St. James.
Yep.
What Comes Around Goes Around track with Jeff Loomis and Stephen Piercy of Rat. The All New Generation. There's different, or Put Out or Get Out with Lizzie Devine singing and Howie Simon playing guitar. So there's going to be some of those tracks on this too that have never been released on vinyl. And the package is going to be awesome. Lots of classic color photos. But that's going to be the title of the next Tuff reissue, Tuff American Hair Metal 2026, digital, deluxe CD, and vinyl.
Were you shocked at how American Hair Band took off?
Again, crazy idea. Had this idea. Tuff's coming back. It was 2000, late 2000. The new millennium's here. Everything was Y2K. I was originally going to call the band Tuff 2K, as in Tuff 2000.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, I need to come up with a song for my comeback. And a lot of people always talk about how they loved All New Generation and talked about all the bands.
Yep.
And it was kind of a salute to music that went from Elvis Presley to Skid Row. And Tuff being the All New Generation, which was technically 1990.
Yep.
So now it's 10 years later, it's 2000, and I said, I got to come up with a song. But I also said, I'm going to take some new metal music and mash it up and sing and rap over it.
Yeah.
It was exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
And I was originally trying to work with like a Limp Bizkit song. Like I was messing around with Nookie. I was messing around with Power Man 5000, Marilyn Manson, Kid Rock, all kind of new metal.
Yeah.
And I was like going to take part of this song and part of this song and try to blend them together. And then the lyric and the content was going to be me singing about being an 80s hair band, hair metal, you know? And I kept coming back to the Kid Rock song, which was technically obviously a Metallica riff.
Yep.
But then I decided to make the breakdown different and throw the curveball with the Dee Schneider Twisted Sister thing.
Yeah.
What do you want to do with your life? You know? And then I just started putting the lyrics together. And I remember Daryl Roberts, who played guitar on it, who played in Wasp and Five Finger Death Punch. He goes, "You're going to sing I like Old Van Halen and Hanoi Rocks, Black and Blue and Britney Fox?" That's totally gay. You know? I was like, yep, that's exactly what I'm going to sing. And then we recorded it. I put it out, and it just, in the early part of 2001, so 25 years ago, this coming first of the year, and it just exploded. I mean, it was getting played everywhere. And I remember Tracy Guns said online, "This is either the dumbest thing ever or the most brilliant genius recording I've ever heard."
Yeah.
Good one, Stevie, you know? But over the years, it's become a massive hit. You know, it was played on Sirius Satellite Hair Nation like endlessly for the first 10 years when digital radio first started kicking in. And then over the years, the only complaints I've had from other band guys was, "How come you didn't put us in the song?"
I
You
knew
know,
you were
like
gonna do that.
Ron Keel called me up and was yelling at me, "You didn't put Keel in there," you know, because some bands get their name while other bands got a shout out with a lyric, you know, a
Yeah.
line or two, or a band member, you know. So, but yeah, it's been a great piece. I'm stoked on it. It's actually just recently been remastered. It sounds like $1,000,000.
Right.
The whole record's going to sound great, and also a ton of killer photos, all classic stuff though. It's
Yeah.
all from 87 to 91. It's just Michael, Todd, George, and Stevie. And it's because there's a percentage of people that hate the word American hair band or hair metal. I'm using both.
Okay.
The album's called Tuff American Hair Metal, and the single main track is American Hair Band. So for all you that don't like those terms, fuck you.
The last question I was going to ask before we kind of promote,
Yep.
and I
Yep.
know, I mean, geez, you've done so many projects that I've kind of glossed over. So
Yep.
Janie and I'm a big Warrant fan. The first band you opened for when you were in California was Warrant.
Yep.
Hearing about Jani Lane's death and what did you, when you heard about it, what was your reaction?
Well, the first thing I'll say is this. I also penned the parody Dear Jani Lane,
That's right.
which was on Hey, That's What I Call Sludge, Volume 1, the Metal Sludge compilation that also included music from Steel Panther. The original Death to All But Metal is on that.
Yes.
Funny Money, Steve Whiteman of Kicks, Jizzy Pearl of Love Hate,
Yep.
Wednesday 13 of Murder Dolls, Firehouse, Kevin DeBro of Quiet Riot. There's a lot of stuff on there. And I wrote the song, the idea, Dear Jani Lane, which came out awesome. And of course, a lot of people got it and they liked it. Even Janie at some point said, "You know, Stevie, I like your songs. You write some pretty campy stuff."
Yeah.
That was his words.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that even though Metal Sludge said the things we said about Janie, me and Janie, you know, him and I, even after, you know, he found out, there was no issue, you know. I mean, maybe he had some thoughts, and maybe at some points he was angry along the way, but he came to some realizations, I believe. And the first time I had seen him since I had come out was in 2005. Those are the couple photos that exist of me and Janie at the Rainbow, and we're
Yep.
sitting at the table together.
Yep.
And I was sitting there having dinner with my cousin, and I saw Evil Dick from Big Brother and Jani Lane walk in, and they sat in a booth about 20 feet away from me. So they're sitting there, and at some point I told my cousin Keith, I said, dude, Janie's sitting over there with Dick. I'm gonna call them. So I called Dick's phone, and I literally see him sitting over here, and he picks up his phone. He's like, hello? And I see him talking, and I'm right there. I go, what are you doing? He's like, oh, dude, I'm at the Rainbow. I was like, oh, who you with? He's like, I'm with Janie. Why? I said, turn around. He goes, what? I go, turn over, look to your right. And he turns around, and I'm like, he's like, oh my God. And he hangs up the phone, and I see him look at Janie, and Janie's like, and Dick's like pointing this way, and Janie like goes, just shakes his head. So like we finish eating. 10 minutes later, I walk over, and I just walk over and I stand in front of their table. And Janie's like, Stevie, right here. Come on, right here, buddy. Everybody slide over. Stevie, you're sitting right next to me. And he put his hands around my neck, and he just started laughing, you know. So we sat there and we started shooting the shit, and it was all good. But then at some point, he kind of started to get a little mad at me. You know, he's like, you know, because of you, I got a divorce. And he was referencing Roanne,
Okay.
not Bobby, but Roanne.
Yep.
He's like, because of you, I had a divorce, and blah, blah. He starts getting mad. I said, hold it. I caused you a divorce, or you caused yourself a divorce? I didn't cheat on your wife. You cheated on your wife. I didn't do this. You did. So at some point, we kind of got a little heated, got a little tension, but it quelled itself. And at the end of the day, you know, we finished our evening. We hugged, we handshook. And then over the years, he would message me, you know, the remaining years of his life, which was another 6 years. He'd say, hey, Stevie, the guys asked me to send you this if you could help us with some promo. They were doing some cherry pie promo thing, you know? Said, hey, not only will I do that, make me some banners, we'll run it, we'll advertise it for free. Cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Janie, I'd love you to work with this band, the Swedish band, these Veins of Jenna guys. Would you, dude, I'd love to write with those kids. Let's make it happen. I'd love to hook that up. Which at some point I brought that up at a studio rehearsal. Nobody wanted to do it except for Lizzie. The other guys, they thought it was stupid. Why would we write with Jani Lane? But so me and Janie became friendly that way, and we'd see each other. And so then I'm in Brazil with Todd Chase, August, whatever it is, 11th. We fly to Brazil on a red eye. We land, we get to the hotel, we check in, we come outside, and now there's a couple fans outside the hotel. This fan comes up to me and he starts talking to me, and then he says, Jani Lane died. And I said, huh? You know, he's kind of got broken English. He goes, yeah, Warrant singer Jani Lane, he died. I said, no, Janie didn't die. You know, where did you hear that? And he looks at me and he said, TMZ. And instantly my heart sank.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I'm in another country. The guy doesn't have the best English, but he just said Jani Lane died and then said TMZ. So I rushed into an internet cafe, which was literally right next to our hotel. And I quickly went online and I logged in. I went into TMZ, boom, and there it was. Jani Lane dead at 47. And
Yeah.
I cried,
Yeah. Yeah.
sat in that internet cafe, read the article, and I know all of that camp. I know all the guys that played with him. Crane, Billy Morris, Brent Woods, Mike Fasano. I'm talking about all the guys that played in his solo bands, you know. Kevin Baldus, who was from Lit, played with him.
Yeah.
And I won't say who all said what, but every one of those guys or some of those guys at some point said, somebody in particular told me he will be dead within a year. And it's sad. And he couldn't control himself. And nobody could help him. Bobby couldn't help him. His manager couldn't help him. Roanne couldn't help him. His third wife, Kim, who he was in the process of probably getting a divorce from, couldn't help him. All of his bandmates, his family, his sister, his brothers, his kids. The guy had a serious, serious problem, which grew and grew and grew. And it's just too bad he couldn't get a grip, because he, still celebrated to this day.
Yeah.
But, I will say that I cried when I heard that. When Eddie Van Halen died, I cried. And, now we lost Ozzy.
Yeah.
Ozzy's supposed to go. He's almost 80, He snorted fucking ants. So, Jani was not supposed to go. But
Yeah.
here we are.
And I'll delete this if you don't want to answer.
No,
But,
you can leave it. You can leave it all. You can leave it all.
Have you ever addressed the sexual assault thing that Bobby talked about, or do you want to, or maybe you don't want to?
Well, no, Metal Sludge covered it. We just talked about what has been rumored. Do I think it happened? I do.
Okay.
And here's what I think. Again, you get people online making stupid comments. Jani Lane's situation, if it did happen, it didn't happen after he was a rock star. It didn't happen when he was the cherry pie guy that sold 4 million records. That's not when it happened. If that in fact happened, it happened when Jani was brand new, fresh off the boat, coming from Florida, because he was first in Ohio, then in Florida or whatever.
Yeah.
From Ohio, but lived in Florida with his cover bands, then came to LA. Maybe it happened in 85 when he first got here. And he's a fresh face, blonde hair, blue-eyed kid off the boat. He's hanging out, partying in LA, clubs, studios, after parties, whatever. And is he hanging out with some industry people, some next level people that are famous? Hey, you want to come and hang out with us, kid? Cool. Let's have fun. Let's have some beers. Let's do some partying. And he thinks he's going to hang out with this, that, or the other. And knowing what we learned about Jani later in life, he had a lack of control when it came to alcohol.
Yeah.
So was he drinking as a 18, 19, 20-year-old that just got here and found himself in a situation that he thought was fun, and he's drinking himself silly, and he's at a party, a backstage, a hotel, a private place, and then all of a sudden he comes to his senses or wakes up and he realizes that something happened.
Yeah.
And of course he then tries to bury that and forget about it.
Yeah.
So that is what I also have heard who it was. It makes sense and lines up. I will not say that person's name. But obviously there's plenty of sexual assault that happens in the industry, and it's not always the man against the woman.
Right.
I mean, the Diddy stuff is a great example of when we're talking about multiple guys that have come out and said, yeah, I was trying to get signed by them and went to this, meeting with Diddy, and next thing I know, he's trying to make me suck him off for a record deal,
Yep.
We've heard about industry people from record labels to managers that were gay or bi, and things that happened. Some that were out,
Yeah.
Bill a coin or things like that. People have talked about stuff that had happened with certain industry agents or managers or other celebrities. So things I, without a doubt, believe happened.
Yeah.
As far as Jani's situation, it doesn't sound to be too far-fetched. How severe it was, or if it was a one-time only thing. Obviously, something happened. I believe Bobby And Jani, in that one audio interview, even said something about being bankrupt and sued and divorced. I've been raped. And he like literally
Yep.
went down. He didn't just say that to
Yes.
throw it in there. You know, he put all the things that are bad that could happen to you in the list.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense.
You have put out so many. I think the only thing that I haven't bought from you is the white vinyl. Is it Decadation that you just put out? Or is that the 85 to 89?
No, Glam Years is a purple black mix. What comes around goes around was 4 colors: black,
Yep.
white, hot pink, and translucent purple. The hot pink is sold out. The white vinyl, what comes around goes around, is down to the last, I don't know, 20 copies or something. Which color do you have there?
I think I have the black.
Fist First is available on orange. Fist First is available on orange and black. Decadation was only black vinyl.
Okay.
And Decadation is, I printed this 15 years ago.
Okay.
And this is 100% out of print. I have a couple copies, but it's no longer in print and no longer available. But all the tracks, most of these tracks have appeared, are also on the Glam Years, and 1 or 2 of them are going to be on.
Yeah, is it the
American Hair
Glam
Metal.
Years on vinyl?
Yes.
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 The Glam, that's the one that I don't have. I don't have Decadation either because it was sold out.
Where the hell is the Glam Years? This is the Glam Years.
Yes. That's the one thing I have it on CD.
This also has a 2-page full color insert. It's got 2 sides to the record. It's got side Jimmy for Jim Gillette and side Stevie. And the Jim Gillette side has got the 6 demos they did with Jim. The 4 of them are from Knock Yourself Out, which is Glamour Girls, Forever Yours, Dress for Dancing, and Candy Coated. They also did a 2-song demo called Ooh Ah Bang Bang. So all 6 of those songs are on here with Jim.
Yeah.
And then one side of the insert is all images of the band with Jim.
Yeah.
And then the other side is Round 'Em Up, Summertime Goodbye, Want Trouble You Got It, Center Street, Ain't Worth a Dime, and Good Guys Wear Black. The 2 Tuff demos that we did from 1988 and 89 are on here.
I love so many of those. So many of those. Like A Place Where Love Can't Go. Holy shit! I mean, there's so many great songs.
A Place Where Love Can't Go was a second ballad we had started to work on with Todd Meager that was going to go on What Comes Around Goes Around, but it never made it. Instead, we put Wake Me Up on.
Yeah.
And then we did demo that song. That has actually also been remastered, and that's going to be on American Hair Metal.
Okay.
Along with People They Change.
That's a great song. Holy shit.
And Don't Complain.
Okay.
And the piano strings version of So Many Seasons is the final track.
Okay. And if I didn't say it before, So Many Seasons, I remember the first time I heard that. You know, I grew up, my parents were divorced, never saw my dad when I was a kid.
Right.
That song came out and I was like, holy shit. I love So Many Seasons probably is my favorite Tuff song of all time anyway.
Yeah.
So you did Tales from the Porn. There's The History of Tuff. There's What Comes Around Goes Around. Again, you put out the Best Stuff Stevie Rachelle album. You just put out a covers album that has a kick-ass song called The Summer of '89. I played it on Rock 101 KLOL.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't, and feel free if you're like, hey, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about any one of those, but all of those are for purchase. You can find at metalsludge.tv.
Well, and for your fan base, for those that have not heard Tales from the Porn,
Yes.
I know it's a weird name. A lot of people don't like the name. I think it's kind of goofy myself. But that record is awesome.
Yes.
And if you listen to that record, at some point you're going to go, this sounds like Rat. This sounds like Skid Row. this sounds like Motley. This sounds like Dokken. This sounds like Poison. This sounds like Whitesnake. This sounds like, right? I mean, like, that whole record has got Guns N' Roses. I mean, you hear everything in there.
Yeah.
It's actually very well produced as well.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I recorded that entire record before I even met the band or ever even spoke to them.
Yeah.
The only thing we did is exchanged emails and Facebook messages. They sent me tracks, and most of the lyric and melody I wrote from scratch. They would literally send me a finished song,
Yeah.
and then I would write it.
Yeah.
Like, I remember they sent me the song Tales from the Porn and said, this title for this song is going to be Tales from the Porn.
Right.
And back to the 80s, Hot Girls, Fast Cars. That was another one they sent me, just the track. And I wrote that, rhyming words like Gazzaris and Ferraris. Right? I mean, there's some Lamborghini and a girl in a bikini. Like, yeah. I mean, if you like 80s hair metal,
Yeah.
the Tales from the Porn record, I mean, Sleaze Rocks, they voted it like the #1 record of 2017. And it sold pretty well because it was printed by Animal Records in Brazil. It was also printed and released by a company in Italy. I forget what they're called. Is it Steelheart Records? Something like that. Then I reissued it on RLS in America. So there's 3 versions. There's a version from Brazil, a version from the US, and a version from Europe. And I mean, it's a great sounding record. It really
I bought
is.
it right when it came out, and I actually, now I got this one. I gave my copy to a buddy of mine who's like, "Holy shit, that's a new Stevie Rachelle thing." So anyway, and then he messages me, he's like,
Right.
"This album is amazing." So I highly encourage people to check out Tales from the Porn.
Yeah. And while you're pulling up all those, I mean, the Tuff catalog is pretty extensive. I think there's 12 different pieces. There's also the, Live in the UK, Decade of Disrespect, Fist First. As you said, What Comes Around Goes Around, or What Comes Around Goes Around Again, The History of Tuff, The Glam Years. On vinyl, there's Decadation, The Glam Years, Fist First, and What Comes Around, American Hair Metal will be next year. There's Veins of Jenna Records, the demos, Lit Up, Let Down, and The Art of Telling Lies. The Art of Telling Lies has been released on vinyl, red and black. It's great. I've also got Jim Gillette's Proud to Be Loud.
Yeah.
Wild Sides, The Wasted Years, which is awesome.
Oh,
Sweet Little Sinner, and what's that? Sweet Little Sinner, and then Crash Diet's on there. Easy as 1, 2, 3 is a great song. And then there's other stuff in the RLS catalog, stuff that I acquired from some other labels. I've got stuff from Quiet Riot, Stevie James of Tiger Tails, the band Pump, some tributes from D-Rock Records like Queen, Rat Collage. I ended up with a bunch of their stuff.
yeah.
So the Metal Sludge site has got a store. TuffCDs.com is the same store link for my big cartel store. There's upwards of 150 or almost 200 listings. Merchandise, beanies, hats, CDs, vinyl. And I appreciate people supporting it, and all kinds of tour shirts. I've got Tuff tour shirts from Brazil, from Australia, the different US tours, classic What Comes Around Goes Around looking stuff. There's, Monsters of Rock, some shirts left from those cruises. We made a specialty shirt. We got hoodies. There's a lot of stuff, and anybody's support is greatly appreciated. And I appreciate you as well, Anthony, for giving us all a platform here, you know?
No, I always tell people, I mean, please support these bands that are out there doing it, and these people that are supporting this type of music. So go to metalsludge.tv and pick something. Oh shit. Okay, so Stevie's phone died. He's back on. Obviously, when you interview for this long, that might happen. I had just been saying, please go to metalsludge.tv. Check out all the awesome Tuff stuff. The merchandise, the shirts, the hoodies, the newly reissued vinyl, Fist First, What Comes Around Goes Around, all of that. And then where and I know, well, I know you're on Facebook. I know you have X. I know you have
Yep.
Instagram. Is there any, and I'll put the Metal Sludge and toughcds.com in the description. Is there anywhere else I can send people to follow you?
Just Google me, Stevie Rachelle or Stevie Tuff. I mean, Stevie Tuff on X. I think it's Stevie Tuff on Instagram. Couple different options on Facebook. And of course, I think all that stuff lends itself. I think X is connected to Threads or whatever, but metalsludge.tv or .com,
Yep.
you find everything there. A lot of what I used to kind of blog on the boards, or I would even write on Facebook.
Yep.
I'm trying to do more of my posts and say, if you want to read my stuff, go to Metal Sludge, because
Yep.
that's where I want to get my word out.
Yep.
But I share it on all my socials. So
Yep.
I'm on all of them. And of course, Metal Sludge, or I should say, Tough Stuff is all available through all the digital platforms to listen if you want to stream, Spotify, whatever. But hey, if you're a fan and you want to support, please buy some merch. I also have an account through Amazon and eBay. The eBay is Tough CDs, or if Amazon, if it says RLS Records or Metal Sludge Entertainment, that's coming from me. I do everything myself. I sign everything. I package everything. There's no, hey, that's my manager or my socials assistant. Like some
Right.
guys say that, but they don't really have that. They just want to give the illusion that they're more
Right.
important than they are, but
Right.
they're really doing it themselves.
Right. Right.
Or it's their wife or girlfriend. But yeah, I do everything myself.
Stevie Rachelle, you have just been a force for good in this music we love so much, and I think you, out of all people, have done more than anyone to help keep it alive. And on a personal note, thank you so much for all your support of the channel and for doing sludge articles on my interviews. It means more than I can tell you. It has been an honor having you on.
Dude, it's been an honor as well, Anthony. I'm glad that we have this friendship. I'm glad that I was able to help you out with that Brett Michaels hang.
Yo, man, that
There'll
was,
be more of those. Let me know
yeah.
when there's some cool concerts coming, and if I can pull some strings and get you hooked up, I'll do it. I appreciate you, buddy. You've been awesome, and you've been doing a lot for all these bands as well. You got a great channel going here. You're going to be at 10,000 before we know it. And I know people are starting to talk about you too. A lot of people are talking about you and your branding. So you're doing a great job.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot, man. Hey, I'll be messing, but I'll just throw this out there. If you think Todd or Michael would want to come on and promote or talk about their version of the story, let them know. I
I'll
definitely.
let them both know.
So I'm gonna try to put this out on Monday. I'm gonna try to get it out right away.
Awesome. It's a
So,
long one, but good luck for everybody. Thanks for everybody that listened, and to all the fans that support. Can't say how much I appreciate you. Keep supporting me and my brands, and of course Anthony, and along with all the others. There's other podcasters, other bands, other indie labels. Support them. Give them some love.
all right. All right. Take care, Stevie. Thanks again, man.
Dude, have a good weekend. We'll talk soon, Anthony.
All right. Sounds good. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.